boom. You hear doors bang, dudes in balaclavas run in with dogs, faces on the crowd. Are you part of the Australian Army? I can't answer that question. Okay, take off your shirt. I suggest you take it more seriously. Do you think you're in a position to kill anyone? You've got 48 hours worth of useful knowledge. They don't want to know how we train, they'll just want to know what job you want and what are you doing. So I'm wearing shorts, a shirt with my armor, like the bare minimum that you had to be on picket. And every now and then they do something over there that they were used to. Like people who deployed before were used to. So I'd be like, maybe it's a test fire? And then you hear the and a bit closer, like not a heap closer, but far enough, just went. And he's like, we're on line OT, which basically means that you're like, they're just walking shots onto you. So it's a matter of time until it gets to you. He said he saw the car lift up and it turned like 90 degrees. So it went off like right there. My right leg was gone. I was trying to breathe. So like you hear that. So blood was pouring down my throat from my nose being shattered. For some reason that the moment where everyone found me in the rubble isn't the most talked about part.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We've got a special one for you today. Damien Thomlinson, there's someone who I've had on the list to interview on the podcast since before we even started it. I give him a big proper intro in a second when we get into the podcast, so I'll leave it all. But guys, trust me, this episode is something that I've been planning for a really long time. His story, well, a lot of it's really unbelievable. He's seen things and experienced things that thankfully a lot of us can only imagine in our worst nightmares. So really inspirational story, and the stuff that he's gone through and his perspectives will absolutely blow your mind. So we'll get into it in a second. Before I do, can I ask for a few favors? If you're watching on YouTube, could you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It'll just mean you never miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you could leave us a 5-star review, I'd really appreciate it. Obviously, since I've been asking the last few weeks, and actually the last couple of months, you guys have been really getting behind the podcast. It's been really helping us grow. So I appreciate you all for doing that. It really does mean a lot. Let's get into the podcast. All right, we're back for another episode. We've just done half an hour off air. We could have easily started recording the podcast earlier. But to jump in it officially, I want to do a bit of an intro to you, Damien, before we get into the podcast. Now, I've known you, we met probably 8, 9, 10 years ago when we were both doing acting, and immediately, like, the response I had to you seeing you, like, I just remember everyone being surrounded by you standing on the stores telling a story, and every single person around you was glued to every word that come from your mouth. So some of you might already know Damien, but a lot of you won't. So I want to do a bit of an intro so you get a good understanding of the man sitting across from me today. So he's Ex-Special Forces Commando, and the Commandos are like the elite group that is tasked with the most physically demanding and mentally challenging and dangerous roles in the armed forces. Now, one night in April 2009, whilst on a night patrol in Southern Afghanistan, Damien's life changed forever. His unit drove over an improvised Taliban bomb. Damien suffered horrendous injuries that night in the explosion, which resulted in both his legs being amputated and severe damage to the rest of his body. All the medical team that worked on him have said it's a miracle he survived. He had to go through many surgeries with single-digit chances of survival, and obviously he came through both of those. Damien was the worst injured Australian soldier to come home since the Vietnam War, so that just shows you the level of what this man's gone through now. The reason I'm obviously having him on the podcast today is he didn't let any of that moment stop him living life to the fullest. He's now one of Australia's most sought-after motivational speakers. He's represented Australia at the Invictus Games twice. He's walked the grueling Kokoda Trail with all these injuries that he's got through. He's a best-selling author of a book called Without Warning, A Soldier's Extraordinary Journey, something that's sold out 3 times and it's in its 3rd run. He's also an actor that appeared in Hacksaw Ridge alongside Andrew Garfield, and a film directed by Mel Gibson where he played a man, funnily enough, that lost his legs in war. So, Damien, it's a real honour to have you here. People that go through and listen to this, you're going to see this man is an extraordinary individual, just the way he tells stories and what he's been through in his perspective. It's one of a kind. So, Damien, thank you for giving us the honour of your time.
Thanks for having me, especially with my intense level of range as an actor.
Yeah, I know. You're a little bit typecast there. So, to start off, before we get into your whole journey, and we'll explore all of that, you're a man that's lived one of the most crazy lives, I think, of anyone I've ever met. But that story I mentioned, like I met Damien when we were both doing acting probably, close to 10 years ago now. And every time he's the type of guy, he tells a story and every single person there would just stop and listen. And by the end of it, we'd have to go into class and just out of nowhere, you'd look around and there's 25 people standing around just listening to what you're saying. So that's my first memories of meeting you. And I just was really fascinated by the way you've come through your adversity and handled all that. And from before we even started the podcast, we had you on the list of someone we'll interview one day. I wanted to wait for the right time. So thank you again, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers for having me, man. I mean, like that that time at acting school was, so I'd obviously done some pretty hectic things in my life, except like in the period of time that most of those 25 kids that you're talking about were in front of me during, they're people who were like working, waiting tables or doing what they're doing or a bar job or something. They moved to the city, which is something at that age I would never have done. You know, I was too busy trying to be as comfortable as, like in my comfort zone type thing. And then, you know, they were all doing that and then going to acting school 4 days a week. You know, so I had just so much respect for the balls of people to be, you know, doing that sort of stuff as like, and have the just confidence to be up there doing stuff, which at acting school, the first year, you just, I mean, you can be, even when you're good, you're still pretty bad. You know, I mean, it's just and you got to get used to that and the embarrassment of being in front of people, which for your whole school life, you're just trying to avoid embarrassment. You know, that's such a big part of growing up. You're just like, oh, just try and stay out of the spotlight, I guess, as much as possible. And then, you know, I don't know. So being able to have a cool enough story to tell was kind of, and I think part of it just grounded me a little bit in there and took the heat off. Like I remember having first year we were just doing a rep thing and I started to feel the walls closing in, and I'd felt it on shooting serials at one stage when you're trying to breathe specifically. And I was like, I'm not breathing properly. Like I was literally like to the point where it was just zeroing in on whoever it was in front of me. I was starting to tunnel and I'm like, just breathe, go. And that's like week 3 or 4 or something. Like I hadn't been there long. I was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. So I really like the people who were sitting there's opinions really matter to me. So like finding a tool to get around that was probably telling those type of stories. You know what I mean?
It's crazy for you to say that, and like it just does put into perspective slightly like the high stakes, not high stakes as in you lived real life high stakes, but for you, someone that lives some of the most crazy, dangerous life that you could live, to then go and you feel the fear and you're not breathing properly when you're putting yourself in that situation, just goes to show a little bit of what actors put themselves through. But you've got such an interesting story, Damien, and there's so much I want to cover, but I do want to start just to paint the picture of a little bit about your life before the military and what that was like. You obviously had your grandfather who fought in World War II as part of the Rats of Tobruk, who inspired you to obviously join the armed forces yourself. Did you hear any war stories from him, or your parents passing on the war stories from him that kind of got you thinking about what life in the military could look like?
No. He was a nursing home ridden, I think, when I was probably old enough to understand what it was. And I remember there was this place, like we grew up on the Central Coast. We lived at Terrigal, but his nursing home was at Wyoming. And I remember never wanting to be in the thing because it smelled. And then he wasn't engaging, because I think he was drugged up, but he wasn't quite engaging the way that, you know, but he was still speaking, I think. So you'd spend a little bit of time in there hanging out, and then your mum would let's run around in the garden or whatever while we're still there visiting him. And I think I always felt a bit of a sense of guilt when I started to know what way was up. And for me, I was always going to university. And this is really weird because I had a friend invited me to his 40th up on the coast, and I saw people who I haven't seen since high school. We were class of 99 too. So this is it's 25 years after, and you've got some people who haven't left, some people who've done different things. And, it was like amazing, but to go back and you're sort of going over some of the decisions that like ended up, I was always going to university. Me and my sister were both going to do that. I think I was probably the front runner in which one was going to do better academically, but sort of half became one of the cool kids in year 11 and 12. You know what I mean? A little bit of that, and then just, made some bad choices in year 12, I think, when it came to like the work I was doing towards where I wanted to be. And I mean, I've never really looked back at the life I've got to live and gone, if I had a different option, I would change anything. You know what I mean? But that's the only one where I'm like, what if? I wonder, would I just be a middle entry level accountant? You know what I mean? Like, am I a general manager or store manager of an Anaconda dealership? Like, what's happening here? Like, did I have it or didn't I? You know what I mean? So, but I went into like the old girl's computer to try and look. My dad worked in IT, and I thought he'll get me a job if I just get a certificate 3. So I work out how to enroll and do that. And then, and I was like, okay, who dad will help. This is that. I looked, and there was like mum's computer had a picture of granddad wearing his medals next to it. And I'm like, I like thought about it for a bit, and I'd work for people who, like, you get trashed when you're young. That's just part of being young. You know what I mean? But so many of the people, I was like, this guy can't even tie his shoelaces, and he's literally telling me how dumb I am. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, man. And then I looked at that and was like, I'd built up so much resentment for all these people telling me I was useless or whatever else had happened through the piece that then I was like, okay, I'll look at the Army website, and the first thing that comes up is direct entry into Special Forces. I'm like, physically and mentally, I know I can do that. It doesn't matter how, like, oh, it's hard. Yeah, cool. It's hard for, like, that guy. It's not going to be hard for me. I'm just going to do it. That's it. And it was literally at that moment the two things crossed. Like, I remember watching the Anzac Day parade and waiting for Pop to walk past and stuff like that, but not having a combo. I think it'd be interesting. Both of my grandfathers, because one of them didn't get to go. He joined the Air Force and did all his training, sat back, and by the time he'd been posted and they were getting ready to rotate, it got called. Oh, wow. Whereas Pop he did 5 different rotations, 5 different deployments. So one of them was really long, like the Middle East was really long. And then he got hit in New Guinea. He got shot, I think, in 6 weeks in. Or he only spent like 3 months there. So whatever it wasn't ages. And but yeah, sitting down and talking to them would be just fascinating. Yeah. I think, I got a lot more questions now than I think I did when I was a little kid. Yeah. If that makes sense. And yeah, it's like I made just a call. That's got to happen. Has to. Like, I've got to prove them wrong. I have to be right about this. Have to. Type thing. You know what I mean? And then just beelining at it. And because that also meant, you're going to get, it's the Special Forces. You're going to get drug tested. You're going to have all of these different things that you've got to do. You're going to have a reason why are you getting away and you're coming out on the piss on a Friday with us? I'm going to be up at 6 o'clock tomorrow. And 6 o'clock I thought was early then. Like, it's wild. Yeah. 6 o'clock so that I can run and this and blah, blah, blah. Like, actually putting the proper amount of time in. I'm kind of glad that moment was like where I stopped accepting just average. You know what I mean? Like,
because you kind of mentally to and fro within yourself about you were a little bit rudderless, but you knew you had this like really high potential that you didn't want to see waste, right?
It's just there. You played sport when I was young and stuff like that, and you always know some people, it just stuff like that comes easy too. Others have to work really hard. The older you get, the more you see some of those kids who just didn't get born with it. They're batting number 3 in first grade because they just worked the whole time. Yeah. They couldn't get a bat in their junior side, and you're like, I think I've reached the time where like hard work overdoes natural talent. You know what I mean? And then,
because weren't you 16 batting 3 in first grade?
Yeah. I think I scored 100 before. I was 18 when I scored 100, but
that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it just worked. I don't know.
So sport was never like something you considered as a career?
My old man was always along the ways of like, I think this is something that's held him back a little bit, so there's 340 people who've been capped at that stage to play for Australia. Like, tell me why you're going to be like 341. Like, now I can think of 6 reasons. Yeah. But when you're young, you kind of like, that's not really a great pep talk. Yeah. Cool. So the odds are slim, but you never, how much chance have you got of winning if you're not even in the room?
Well, the one thing I've learned from life and achieving what I've done is that dreams do come true. Yeah. And there's no limit to your dreams. If you can see it in your head and you believe it to be true, then you can live it in reality. That's right.
But if you're not willing to be there, the first step is being there, and how many people had that dream become a reality sitting on the couch? Like how often can you say, oh, it was, like the later one, the Hacksaw Ridge, it's they say lucky, or like the Hollywood stories, oh, this actor was really lucky. You're like, she was lucky how? Gosh, she was just walking down the street. She got found off the street. What they don't tell you is that street was Sunset Boulevard. You know what I mean? All of a sudden that makes sense. Right? Yeah, if she was in the middle of in Oregon and a producer's just gone, the girl coming out of whatever, the milk bar or whatever, you're her. That would be it. But, it's sort of someone who's had their hat in the mix, and then you're going to get lucky. But
where does your head sit like around the thought that everything happens for a reason, considering everything you've been through?
Oh, it probably does. I deserved it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, yes and no. I'd say yes, except I know some really, really good people who've had wild injustices. You know what I mean? Like, so we just buried a friend's wife, who he's like a sort of mentor role to me. We had coffee this morning, and she's a great human, and she got given 200 days to live. I remember we were sitting down there at her funeral, and like he spoke about it, and it was like, he goes, she was given 200 days to live, and there's 1,347 days later was when she took her last breath. And you're like, but she's also just a faultless human. They're just really good people. That's a long time to battle something that hard. Like, then that's, if everything happens for a reason, like why did that one? Yeah. You know what I mean? Why I listened to that Francis Ngannou to a podcast the other day, and he lost his 15-month-old kid. Like, I can't even go close to wrapping my head around that. So like, I mean, what's that teaching him? You know what I mean? Like, what's the...
Life's definitely not fair.
Yeah, I guess. And I think that's, I like thinking that everything had happened for a reason, but on the same hand, I'm kind of like, maybe it's really irrelevant. So I think, I don't know.
Depends the way you look at it. For me, I guess, like, you can have two viewing points at it. For me, I think I believe I believe everything happens for a reason. Not because I have any logical evidence for it, but it's because it's the way I decide to live my life. Because I can view everything that happens as completely random, and I've got, no control, and I just got to, then I got to deal with, it's so unfair or whatever. Or like you have done, like, you can look at the lesson for the things that you've had to overcome, and like failures in life are redirections. And I believe every time that, one door shuts, it's, wherever you believe in, destiny or God or the universe, it's pushing you closer to
where you should be.
Where you should be, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess it's all about like the perspective that you take on it. 100%. Like, you can sort of look at it, and I get, like, fair's something that I learned like a while back to not look for. Like, nothing's.
It doesn't surprise me that you have to.
Nothing's ever fair. I mean, it's. How many chances that you've got? How many doors that have shut? It's not always something that's. I think the army stops you from thinking about fair, because you're all in the one spot, walking in the one direction, and then just randomly someone's going to get picked to have weekend duty, and then someone's going to get picked to have something else that's awesome. There's going to be 3 dudes who are going to get the course that's going to help them, and then So you got to try and I think it was like going into an environment where you're getting stripped back to we're all the exact same thing. I think I really liked that. It didn't matter what mistakes you'd made. It didn't matter whether you had a degree. It didn't matter whether you were accomplished in your trade or whatever you were. It didn't matter who you were. At that stage, you were recruit Tomlinson. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and every single person in that room's that. And then you earn it as it goes. I think that like kind of was where, like, I started to think of the whole fair situation as, I look at it in a different light. You know what I mean? Like, after me getting hurt, I think I was probably one of the better prepared people in, our guys, to go through something like that. You just got to go. It's going to hurt. You just got to get it done. At the end of the day, you've got to get to point B. You're at the moment at point A. How you get there is on you. So sort it out, like it's, you're not going to have anyone pick you up and put you on their shoulders and go, oh, here we go. You're trying to find creative ways from getting to point A to point B, plus you're just used to dealing with like physical, like just pain, stretching yourself so far, like it's being awake for huge periods of time, carrying big weights, and then not being able to let that voice creep in. That's like why are we doing this? Where are we getting to? What's this? What's that? Any of those circular thoughts, they've all got to go. My job is just to pick this up and go and do that. This hurts. It doesn't matter. Every single other guy's hurting. Like there's 4 other guys who are carrying this thing at the moment. All of us are in pain. All of us would probably rather something drive it wherever it's going, but it doesn't matter. Like if I put it down, 3 people can't carry it. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you carry that weight, I think, when I came back and I'm hurt, you look down and go, like, how did they save me? Like, my right arm was busted. The top bone, both the bottom bones in the arm, the humerus, the radius, and the ulna were all cracked. The elbow was shattered. The hand's busted. My left arm's busted and 2 legs missing. My face was a bit messed up as well. I was like, it just blew my mind of how did they keep you alive? 1, and 2, like I now have to. My next thing's I've got to be standing next to them. Like it doesn't matter what it takes to get there. I just have to get there.
Let's walk through that process to how you got to that moment. So you mentioned before, you jump on the Army website, you see direct entry into the Special Forces. You're like, mentally, physically, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right? That's just what you had within you. We've heard, like, everyone's heard different stories of, how difficult the preparation and the selection process is to get into, like, the elite of the elite within the armed forces. Talk to me about what that process was like once you applied, you got in to start going through the selection process. What did that look like? Well, because you have to go through different things, I imagine, to become a commando than just to be like a normal.
Yeah, they don't just go, one day. Yeah, pretty good. You can
Monday,
you can be one. Yeah.
What was that process like?
Sometimes you got to have, I think, a thing, like something that can go through your head when you really need it. Mine, I think, was this is just what it takes to be a commando. Like, it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how tired I am. It doesn't matter how much pain I'm in. This is what it takes. This is like the minimum level of expectation. And if you walk into every problem you've got with that, then you're just willing to wait it out. I found the only time stuff got hard through that training process was when you started to mix real life in with it. You know what I mean? Like when you're living off base, you're starting to, you've got relationships and you're trying to balance a normal life, and then you're going back to the thing. That was the only time it mentally got hard. Like besides that, on a Friday night, I've got nothing better to be. This is what it takes to be commando. It's 11:30. Yeah, let's do another serial. Let's do it. It's not like I wonder whether my mobile phone's flashing at the moment because it's got messages that are unread. Like you've got none of that. See, I mean, parts of it are hard, but like the physical stuff, my brain was like, if I'm going to get off this, right, I'm just going to wake up in hospital. If I wake up in hospital, that means I've gone hard enough. And I just never woke up in hospital. So it was like, it's like try and hold yourself through it. I mean, you go through some like wild things.
Just a quick one from me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'd know that after scaling Happy Skin Co. to over $10 million per year, I spent close to 18 months creating the viral brand builder program, which teaches someone with zero experience how to launch and scale their very own e-commerce brand. With over 100 training videos and direct access to me, including one-on-one calls, you'll be guided throughout the entire process. Now, we already have a bunch of incredible results from students that are making multiple 5 and 6 figures per month. So if you want to learn how to build a business that has the potential to completely change your life, then click the link in the description and book in an application call today. Spots are limited as you'll be speaking directly to me. So hopefully I'll chat to some of you soon. But until then, let's get back to the podcast. What were some of the drills, tasks, I'm not sure what you call them, that you had to do that really tested you to see who's cut out to be a commando?
Well, the selection course is basically like it's 3 weeks where that's where they work out. One, you've got to be trainable. It's strange because the whole time you think you're on wood. They're watching every single movement that I do, every single thing. Whereas like each day they're sort of looking for a specific attribute. They're under pressure. So we got there.
But you also don't know what they're looking for on one particular day, right?
Got no idea. And no one's going to tell you until you're there. Like it took years of being at the unit before I'm just like, so you guys are running a selection course. Like it's pretty, what does the board look like? And like, everyone had that. And I'm like, so you really used to like hearing people have notepads that had Velcro on them. You'd be laying there doing something. And then you'd feel like there's a guy standing there, and then you'd hear his notepad go off. You'd hear, oh no. You start looking at your gear. You're a bit paranoid. You haven't slept in ages. You've walked for ages that day. What am I doing? Pretty sure I'm in the right spot. Oh, I've got to be looking out. What am I doing? And then you talk to them and they're like, oh, we do heaps. You write shopping lists, you do stacks and stuff. Like it's just building pressure.
Yeah.
Through that, but to give you an idea, we got there, they pull everyone's gear out to make sure that you've only got the exact items, like to the letter that they asked you to bring on the form. Then we got fed, we did lessons. Like you sort of do some lessons when you're first getting there, and then we had to wake up the next morning. I think we got to sleep most of that night. I'm pretty sure we got a fair bit. You're up at Sparrow's Fight. We did a PT session in the morning, which is just like the torsion bars and stuff. And you right into it, and it's day one. You're just ripping in, and then it's like, okay, you're doing your route march. And there was a type of the entry test. The entry test is like a 3.2K run with your webbing and a rifle in under 12 minutes. You got to do as many push-ups as you can, as long as it's pretty much above 60. You get like a 2-minute period, and then 100 sit-ups, but you do them to a cadence, 10 chin-ups, and then there was like usually you would do for the entry test, you do a 12K route march where you've got 28 kilos pack webbing and rifle weight up. For when you're on selection, you do that first section, and they go, okay, we get on the trucks, you get on these Unimogs, and then you do a 20 clicker. 20 kilometers is a long way, carrying that much weight. Like it hurts. How much
is the weight?
28 kilos.
28 kgs.
Yeah. And you have to have it weighed out. Like everyone, and that's a process as well. Like for the whole time, you're
20 kgs with that much weight strapped on.
Yeah, just hooking in. And so I was lucky. I had really good feet. Some people, boots just shred their feet up.
Yeah.
Some people get blisters, and I was kind of pretty fortunate with that. And my body was pretty agreeable to it. You know what I mean? Like other people were getting little niggles and whatever, but so you do that, you come back, and then they go, all right, cool. You got to reset. We've got this. Then we went into a thing, and they go, cool, now you've got your nav exercise. And for your navigation exercise, that's pack on again. And we've got 2 days where you're going from waypoint to waypoint. You go back, they give you one, and it's somewhere on this massive map that you then have to sit down, sort of get 5 or 10 minutes, because you think they know how many you've got.
Yeah.
I'm candidate number 70. I'll never forget that number. And then, so you've done that for 2 days.
I remember, you sleeping much in that 2 days?
You're trying not to, type thing. You know what I mean? Like, and you can't just randomly fall asleep in a field. But you also can't sit down. Like, the minute you start going, you're plotting a thing and you feel yourself just drifting, then you hear the Velcro go. You're like, I'm absolutely awake here. All right, cool. I'm going to get up and walk off, and you're doing it at night. You're doing your walks and everything that you can. I remember after it, we just wrecked, and we got driven back to this bit at Singleton at all hours of the morning, but it wasn't light. It was at that weird stage where it's starting to go light soon. So it's like maybe 4-ish or something, where it really starts to get cold. And then this guy comes out and does a talk in front of us about how he's got cows. I've got cows. I really love walking with my cows. Because of you guys, I'm not walking with my cows today. Packs on. And then just starts walking. He's not carrying anything. And it turns out this guy's Colonel Hans Fleer. Was a legend in the SF world. He'd been to the Falklands. He'd done all of these different things, like the UK Army. It was just funny the way that he just threw it away. Walking with my cows, and because I can't.
What's going through your head hearing him talking about this?
Oh, no, here we go. Okay, here it goes. Yeah, we're getting up and we're walking. Yeah. We're walking again, go, go, go. Type. Yeah. Just get in the line, just don't be seen, don't be last.
So that selection process, do you feel it tests you more physically or mentally?
Mentally. That's like you're in your own way for so much of it. Like at the end of it, the same guy, they called a pile of numbers, you know, and this is so we'd had heaps of people withdraw because of injury or they'd been booted or whatever. And then we're all sitting in this room at Singleton and they go on number this, 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 number this. You can stand up, walk outside that door, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, look, and there's guys, you're like, wow, that guy was really strong. That guy was good too. Oh, no. You're like looking around. Okay, this guy, he fell asleep at that thing. You're trying to like mark it, but everyone at some stage on the course did something that they weren't supposed to or like you're not going to be perfect the whole time. You know what I mean? You don't push people to breaking point and then just go, why weren't you perfect then? You know what I mean? Like it's more about how you respond to those things. Like, do you start pointing blame at people who are around you or do you just go, okay, cool, my bad, sorry. Like, let's do it. You can never really say sorry. You can just sort of imply it, I guess.
Yeah.
But then, and then he gives this speech about, you know, when the Australian Special Forces will undertake tasks and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and I'd like to congratulate you all. You're the type of candidate we're looking for. I remember just like, wow. Yes. Like it was, but that's just the start of the reinforcement cycle. Then the reinforcement cycle, you got course after course after course of like roping, weapons, like demolitions the whole way through for another like 10 months. You know, urban operations, then you do the advanced urban course, which is the domestic counter-terror style stuff. Then you need 2 insertion skills. So you have to be able to parachute and you have to be able to like amphibious operations to get onto like islands in the Pacific or whatever you're doing. So there's all that type of stuff that then comes like, and that's really when the work starts because that's when you're finding that like work-life sort of balance. But through it, the most memorable hard bit, you've seen The Recruit, right?
The Recruit.
With Colin Farrell? You would have been young.
I don't know.
He gets like recruited by a CIA guy who's not De Niro, Pacino, yeah. Al Pacino, yeah. And there's a scene in it where they get captured. And we got this brief. I remember we're sitting in the mess and you get this brief, you're sitting in there and everyone's like, oh, you know, because every now and then they get the company together and you're like, okay, cool. I remember looking up and it says conduct after capture. Cool. Awesome. This is going to be great. And then they're like, you know, they did a roll call where everyone's there and you don't know whether it's going to happen that day. They're like, okay, cool. And everyone, they go, you know, this course is strictly volunteer only. Congratulations, you've all volunteered. The form's over there. And like everyone's going to sign it type thing. Yeah. That, like, what followed that, it was a week later or something like that. We knew when we were going, but we didn't know when anything was going to happen. So, like, we'd all been out. Everyone had been out in Coogee the night before as well. Like, I remember getting out there, I was hungover, and I was like, we should have plenty of time. Like, they're going to let us prep before we get there. We've got to fly somewhere. We're at Richmond. So we're sitting there at Richmond, and they're doing this, like, sort of story where they're talking about boys who deployed before we're talking about it. And boom, you hear doors bang. Dudes in balaclavas run in with dogs. Face on the crowd, Ah. Like, and they'd already told us, you can't fight. You can't fight these guys. There's more of you than them. Like, what we didn't know, and we got told after it was, because the SAS do that course at the end of their patrol course, like, which means that you're basically saving the guys off the next reinforcement cycle. And then they go on to do the rest of their training. And that's one of the first little bits of bro time they get. But apparently, like, the one collarbone, 2 arms, because they were went in geared up, they just broke the guys. So we got warned. You're not allowed to do that, you know. So, and then they you've done some basic interrogation work of what type of person you're going to get at the other side of the table, and that's, you know, the good cop, bad cops. And
so you're getting interrogated.
Yeah, well, you get that through bits of it, but then the in between bits, the hardest bits, are like the sensory deprivation. So you got a set of goggles on that are blacked out, earphones over your ears. And in the background, there's a song playing, just really loud, you think. But you're sitting on, it's like industrial flooring, this mat.
Yeah.
And by that stage, you've already, you've gone in and there's a chick standing there, sitting next to a dude who's at a table just going, okay. So, and you can name your date of birth, your rank, and your number. I'm like, okay, cool. And I can't answer that question. They're the 5 things that you can say, and that's it. So it's like, oh, is your name? It's just a guy like you just talking to me. Oh, so is your name, your name Dylan Mullan? Yep. You're like, yeah, okay. Is your date of birth this? Are you part of the Australian Army? I can't answer that question. Okay, take off your shirt. I remember doing it going, please don't hit me with anything. You ought to be like, okay, cool, take off your shirt. And then they do go through the same things again. Are you here with anyone else? I can't answer that question. Off with your right shoe. They do that until you're just standing there naked and there's like a guy just like, are you a man? You know what I mean? Like giving you just dick shaving you where there's some bird. Like by all accounts, I'm pretty sure the interrogator chick was reasonably hot as well. So it was even worse. And you're just standing there and then they're like, we have to do this, put you in a hospital robe. And then you go and you got to sit in a stress position. It's like 48 really, really long hours. Like it was like as mental as it was. Like at one stage, it hurt so much that if you ever get bored, get a milk crate, get home at like 2 a.m, go in the cold and just get nude and sit on it. Just see how long you can for. And like it's, and the whole time like there's songs off like Tool's Anima album where there's one where they do a German recipe. That was on repeat. The baby screaming was another part. And that was like 4 hours just on repeat. And every now and then they'll just switch it up. They walked us into a room at one stage. And, and I remember I was sitting on the ground, my back was hurting, and my legs crossed. Someone slid their hands down in between my legs to push my legs down. So I kind of like trapped my arms a bit and said, if you touch me again, cunt, I will kill you. It was like, and you're at that stage. I mean, I'd probably already cried like twice by then. You know what I mean? You're under goggles, you forget that everyone can see you and you're just sitting there. And I remember getting picked up and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to another one. I went outside and you're walking through the thing and you never know. Your mind draws this picture because you haven't seen any of it, how big it is. And they keep turning you around in circles and walking you off in different things so you can't draw a map in your mind of what it looks like. And they kick my legs out from under me and bang, I hit the ground, like kneel. Okay. All right, I'll get up and do this. Cool. So I'm like kneeling on this gravel going, that sucked. Lifts the ear up and just goes, do you think you're in the position to kill anyone? I can't answer that question. Like, I'm sort of giggling at it, like, what can you do? And then he goes, I'm going to ask you again, and I'd suggest you take it more seriously. Do you think you're in a position to kill anyone? I'm like, I can't answer that question. I remember the shock of the cold water. It was cold enough at that stage, and it felt like there was so much. Like, it felt like a whole swimming pool of just freezing cold water was on me. And just, it was like, and they pick us up, they take you back in, and then you're back on like the milk crate or whatever it was. Or I don't know whether it was on a mat or the milk crate at the time, but I knew that my only way of getting out of it, which I wanted, but you can't put your hand up and go, I've had enough, because the rest of the room is still sitting there. You assume that everyone else is in the same spot. You could every now and then hear someone swear at something or whatever. But then I was like, okay, if I lift my arms, my body will stop holding heat. I'm going to go down with cold. That was my way out. Like, that's literally where your mind's at. This sucks so much. I don't care. Yeah, if I've got to do that and just, because like I said, I'm either making it or I'm waking up in hospital. And I was like, all right, cool. That's how it's happening. And they came, and like by that stage, I was shaking, and I think I'd almost stopped. And that's when you got to worry. If you're cold and you're still shaking, you've got plenty of time. When your body stops and your blood's starting to go to the center, then you're in trouble. It's trying to just go keep this guy alive. And they came in and go, look, we've got to put a thermometer in your thing. We're out of exercise and whatever. I'm like, lift the goggles up. If you don't lift the goggles up, you can off. She goes, look, I can't. My name is, and she gave me the Captain blah, 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 Australian Army, and this, and this. I'm going to lift the goggles up. Like, because the whole time you're just like, this could be anything. Yeah. She's like, I can't do that. Oh, off then. So she, oh my God, her. So she walks off, and then it was a couple of minutes later, and I'm like, at this stage, I'm like, okay, this may be hurting a little more than I wanted it to, you know what I mean? Like I might have bitten off more than I can chew here. And then she comes and goes, look, it's this, I can't take your goggles off. You're part of an exercise. It's as a part of this, blah, 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 blah. I have to check your temperature. So, okay. Like, so she puts a thermometer in my mouth and just literally, as soon as it registered, goes, you got to come with me now. So her and someone else picked me up, and I sort of walk along. They put me on a bed that was stretched out. I had hot water bottles between my legs, under my arms, blanket over the top of me, and they lifted my ears off. And I think for like the good of me, there were two of the directing staff just going, I hate doing this. This is like the worst time. You know, I hate doing this course. We've got to do it twice a year. And it just sucks. But just hearing two humans say that was kind of like, okay, all right.
What are they trying to see in you or test in you in exercises like that?
They're training interrogators as much as us. So they're training ink guys with guys who can handle it. And then, because like realistically, if someone's offering to like take your tattoos off with steel wool, you're probably going to tell them whatever they want. You know what I mean? Like if it hurts enough, you can get someone to talk. You know, the whole theory is you've got 48 hours worth of useful knowledge. You know, they don't want to know how we train. They'll just want to know what job you want and what are you doing. So you got to try and disorient someone to the point where they think that 48 hours is elapsed or something of the sort. So, yeah, it's about, and that's just one of them. It's training your resolve as well. You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to, and you still got to play the game under pretty extreme circumstances. So,
doing my research on you, I know obviously someone that joins the commando, you generally don't have too many things you're afraid of. The one thing that you've spoken about that probably makes you feel more uncomfortable than other things is being submerged under like murky waters. Have you had any training experiences or real situation experiences where you had to do anything like that?
No, nothing. No, and I mean, I could have at that stage as well. Just be like, okay, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
Like my absolute fear is like people being whipped. Just cracks me. Like absolutely. Like it took me so many watches to get through the Temple of Doom. And like every now and then you'll have a girlfriend who you'll tell about it. And then I had one that she didn't last long, but like goes, oh, you know, we'd pick a movie to watch and she picks The Count of Monte Cristo. And I'm like, why are we watching that? Oh, a guy in a French jail. And I go green. But like before we deployed, I watched so much of it online to try and stop myself fight going green. You know, I saw it as like weakness. Like it was so bad, even like at acting school, right? So you do activities indoors. Did you hear about this one? Okay, so one of the girls, like quite a hot one, I was doing the door and I had my circumstance worked out. She opens it and I can only remember like she had her nipples taped and was like wearing I think it was a black G-string. And like, cause I kind of did the first take. You know, you take the first thing you see and you're like, here's a practical, oh my God, she's holding a whip. Why are you holding? And literally in that thing, because I'd just gone from something I think I really wanted to see into something I definitely didn't. Like, I just, I couldn't.
What was your reaction?
I was having a panic attack pretty much. Like I couldn't get out of it. Once I was in it, like you can hear me stumbling now, like just stumbling over my words. I was doing the same thing and you're trying to call their behavior. And I remember Jeremy Shadler was the teacher at the time. So that's how vivid I remember some of the terrifying ones. And he goes, like, call his behavior. And then one of the girls in the back of the room goes, he's having a panic attack. And I literally was, I was like, I was the worst. But that's like, and I think that's why, like when they said take your shirt off, I'm like, they can't leave a mark. Oh, okay, get ready. You know, I'd tried different stuff to get it out. But yeah, it's still a little bit in there. But they don't use it as much in movies these days.
So from that whole like training selection process, all of that before your actual first deployment, What do you think was like the major thing you learnt about yourself, or the major lesson you took away from that period before you were thrown into action?
I was just be you. I was trying to be too, because you don't know what type of guy that guy is. You know what I mean? Like, who does serve in the special forces? What do they look like? You never hear. They're just normal people who've chosen to do an extraordinary job. You learn really quickly that, or not really quickly. It took me probably longer than the average human to learn that you don't have to be tough. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be able to fight every single guy in the room. You've just got to know when you need to use that skill. You know what I mean? So still a bit gung-ho over, like, I was getting hassled with a nickname when I was young, and they would give me shit about it, and I'd be like, well, I've got to fight that guy over it. Like, literally schoolyard stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we're grown men doing a job that's this, and you're talking about fighting someone. Like, yeah, it's kind of like being 21, but it's also not like being 21. And I think I got back after when we did our first deployment on the Fiji boat. Wasn't fun, but I did a trip to East Timor, which it was beautiful. The place has got reefs around it, and it was just amazing. And I kind of went back to being the surfer from the Central Coast. Like, I just left. It's like I left Army guy in Sydney. And then I realized, like, it'd still just be me.
And just, do your job at the same
time. And do it. And then people were gravitating, because you're being authentic as well. You know, people then gravitated towards it. You know, everyone wanted to play guitar and surf as well. And you're like, okay, here I was running away from something that's really what I needed to have. And it's just be you. You know, and it would have worked for anyone, regardless of where they came from, as long as they're just doing them, because you can smell it, you know?
That's one of my biggest lessons in life that I took away from the acting experience too, but into business and then going on podcasts and speaking at events. Like, being you is your superpower.
Yeah.
Because if you're there's only one you. No one can copy that.
That's it.
Like, they can try copy it, but it'll never be the same thing. Like, so it's crazy that even in that insane profession that you took on, the lesson still was just be yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You literally can't lose. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, you're still going to walk out of that room and you're still going to be you. You know what I mean? Like, it's do your best to create a win-win in any situation you're in. You know, that's what you want to do. You want to load the odds in your favor.
You mentioned your first deployment in Fiji. What was that experience like? Because you weren't actually on the ground in Fiji for a lot of it. You were on the boat in preparation.
Canimbla. Right? Yeah, it was awful. Oh my God. I played golf with a guy on Wednesday who worked for a long time on that shit, and we were talking about it, and it was like wildly overloaded. We had a squadron of SAS, a company of us, 2 Black Hawks pilots, a bunch of Navy crew, like just a heap of stuff. So originally, but as well, we got the brief that the 2 companies, we were all getting flown to Townsville. We found out like that day that we were going. They're like, everyone's in the room. We're going to Fiji. Is there any reason why anyone can't do this job? No one obviously is going to say, oh, yeah, I'm kind of busy tonight, whatever. So it's just like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. And they go, okay, sweet, we'll go home, get your stuff. You kind of got 4 hours to be back, and then we're going. Okay, cool. So you go home, you get your stuff together. And, like, at that stage, you don't know what to take. You're kind of like, okay, you've only done courses where you've got to take specific stuff. So I didn't even have a book, a computer, anything. I had a trunk full of just the stuff that I needed to do the job when we hit the ground, which, looking back, was a bad choice. But, like, also when we got on the ground in Townsville, our group, like, so we were broken up into 3 platoons. 2 of the platoons were going to be going on Canimbla as the quick reaction, as the initial force that you'd use. We were like the quick reaction force to follow. And we were going to then parachute in with bundles and do it that way. So we're just going to be living out of the bases of Townsville. Other guys are going to be on the ship. And you're like, okay, cool, this is sweet. We get up there, and then the boss just goes, "It's been a change of plans. Everyone's getting on the ship." So make any calls you got to, because you got to give your phones in. And then he goes, on second thoughts, there's probably no reception where we're going, so keep them, I don't care. Like, he's kind of done that. Remember then, like, I had a girlfriend who lived around the corner. I was like, hey, our phones are going to be off for a while. I don't know when we'll be back on. Yeah.
That's just the reality of the life when you're in the army, right?
Yeah. And then I think it got kind of real on that 2 days in. we're still sailing out, and you get an in brief every day, an intelligence brief, and then we hadn't even reached our like battle box off Fiji, and the guy who's Frank Bainimarama, he's been the prime minister forever, and the people love him. He's having beers with the guy who he's having a non-violent coup with at the rugby. And they're like, so here the two are pictured together. And you're like, wait, so we're being deployed so we can stop these two arguing and they're having beers at the rugby together. And they're like, yeah.
So what do you do in that situation? Like, is it just sitting there on hold?
Yeah. Yeah. You're just in a consistent, like, in a holding pattern the whole time. And then, like, you're limited with the contact with the outside world. You're just in this small, like, it was overcrowded. It was hard to sleep. The room just smelled like a man who hadn't showered. Just like 100, like, guys. Oh, it was rough. But, like, I think it got the hardest so I saw a guy, and you know when you know someone, you're just like, I don't know whether I grew up with him. Like, sport, you make a lot of connections where, you know, you'll see the guy, know his face, but not quite know him. Per se. Like, I kept walking past this guy and I was just like, hey, bro. Hey, man, I got to say, like, I knew he was from Perth. He was one of the SAS operators because his hair was long and he had a bit of a beard. And I was like, okay, so he's one of them. Hey, bro. And he's like, hey, man, how you going? I said, yeah, pretty good. Did you play baseball or something? He's like, I played cricket. You played for Matcham, right? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm glad you cut your hair because I had, like, this long blonde hair when I was young. And it's like, yeah, they sort of make you with this, don't they? And he goes, yeah, they do. So, yeah, I played first grade for Tukley. I was their wicketkeeper. Like, wow. So I played my first game of first grade against him.
Against this guy.
Yeah, and was like, so I'd sort of seen him from a distance a bit. And then we were all in the smoker's deck, which was sort of like the pub of the ship. Everyone would go up there and you'd all hang out, and people who didn't smoke would smoke. It was... God, it feels like eons ago because now no one smokes. You know what I mean? It's like you got to in your room under a blanket if you're going to. But then he's, I remember being there and hearing this, like they were doing serials, like sniper serials on the choppers. And then I remember hearing this bang and like looking up and there's rotor blades fly or debris flying in the air. And this guy just goes, take cover! Like it was a Hollywood movie. It was wild. Then just ducking. Okay. Up. I remember seeing him and then running like on his back up to the top. There's a comms deck which had you look over the back. I remember looking, and you've done Hewitt training, which is like helicopter tail stuff when you're underwater. And you do it blindfolded, and I surfed my whole life. I was fine. When you dunk me in water, flip me upside down, I'll be fine. I'll find my way out. You know what I mean? Like, but whereas people say more country folk haven't spent as much time in that type of water. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's not too many days you've had to contend with like that. But I remember getting up and going, we should be able to see this chopper rolling. There was nothing. We just saw, pop, there's one, and this guy's like counting people up. And I'm like, just looking, just watching him, just going, it finishes at 5. And I was like putting the thing together in my head going, there's more than 5 people. And no, this is really bad. Okay, all right. An alarm sounded, everyone had to go back in and then back to like their bed space. They were doing a count or whatever of what everyone was, like how many people were there and, you know, going through everything. And 2 guys had like popped their RFDs or flotation device so low that they ended up on the other side of the ship. One of them that came up was the pilot, Mark Bingley, and they couldn't resuscitate him on the deck. So we got up there, but he ended up dying on the deck, and the other one was Josh Porter. So, but we didn't see anyone. For 48 hours, they cut the phones, they cut everything until the families had been notified. And then rather than telling us, they said everyone finds out at the same time. So it was like a little 30-centimetre screen TV in the corner. We had all of our guys like standing there, and then I just saw that his face pop up. Oh. It's literally a guy I was speaking to a few weeks before that grew up in the same spot. And, you know, it sort of hits that bit different. You know what I mean? And I was sort of like, at that stage, it's pretty intimidating. I was probably about 26 or something.
So what was it, like a training drill that went wrong or
yeah,
like mechanical failure or?
Pilot just missed his landing, he hit a rail, I think, on the way in. You can actually, I've seen it on YouTube, but I don't know whether you can find it. I'd encourage you not to find it, because you obviously don't want to watch the last moments of Josh's life. But yeah, I saw it at one stage and just watched, because I'd only heard it, what had happened from the top level. But yeah, then it hits, and so it catches a rail on the way in. But it's just like error. I mean, that's the thing. Pilots, a Black Hawk's like a supercar that still doesn't quite handle like a supercar. So those pilots are amazing. Like, they're out of this world.
It's really fine boundaries as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, a lot of them have just been, parts of the mistakes. We've had in Afghanistan, our unit lost like 12 guys, and 5 of them were in choppers. So
when you lost Josh, was that your first experience of like actually being there to see one of your mates lose their lives?
Yeah. That's the first one, and just like that's what it costs type thing. You know what I mean? But of all things, but then that, when we were talking about injustice before, like it's unfair. We're out here, he's dead now, and we're stuck out here on a training thing. Like, is it, not even on a training thing, we're just in a holding pattern, sorry. Like, why are we, it's cost the Black Hawk now, it's cost that, we know that they're not going to jump, why are we here? And then you make it home. I held on to that for probably too long. But yeah, it wasn't until the East Timor trip that I started to really enjoy what I was doing as a thing. I sort of was like, it became a job up until East Timor. It was like,
what changed? What was different in East Timor?
I had good people. I didn't and that was one of the things. I didn't understand how, the world works. You're sort of too proud to say, how does this work? You know what I mean? Too proud to sort of like, we're all the same because we're all wearing the same beret. And it's just like, no, this guy's like, has vastly more experienced. And then if people are like, sometimes you get dicks, but if they're generous enough, they'll sort of be like, take you under. And I had a full team of guys that were all really, really open about wanting to get the best out of you as long as you turned up. And that suited me. You know what I mean? So I could go in there just as me, just as Damien the Surfer, and then do our thing and then be really focused on what the job really took. And then I sort of fell back in love with it.
I heard you speaking, or giving an example of something, and it made so much sense to me. It was like, so you're working in a team in a corporate environment, and yeah, you're all there to support each other, but you might hold certain pieces of information back because you want them to do well, but not better than you. But when you're playing for keeps with the highest possible stakes, you'd want, like, with everything you have, everyone around you to be in the position to do the best they can, because it might cost your life if you don't.
Yeah,
so
or worse, theirs.
Well, exactly.
I mean? Like, it's got to be worse than dying carrying someone else out. You know what I mean? Like, that's ultimately it. That's what makes that machine so strong. You want everyone. You want to do what you can to make the people around you better, like, because they're going to pump you up, and you're accountable to each other. And then you realize, like, at the end of the day, but this is the greatest thing about that job. There's stuff that separates it from infantry. Like, infantry, you're told to do it.
Yeah.
You'll get walked through every single thing you've got to do. There, it's just expected. They go, your shit's got to be in one socket, don't turn up. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not ready to go, you'll be found out really, really quickly, and then you'll just be removed. You know what I mean? So it's all on you. And the line of how good you've got to be, there isn't a bar that you've got to pass. You've just got to keep pushing. You know what I mean? You've got to keep going through these, like, people were doing the paleo diets and stuff before it was a thing. Like CrossFit, before it was called CrossFit, similar sort of things, going body weight. We have to be able to do it so we'd deploy to Afghanistan once or 3 times when I first got to the unit. But they were like, and on the cars, everyone does stuff in the gym, except it's pointless if you can't do it with your body weight. Like, it just, but this wild, like, there was no bar. You've just got to be better than you are. So you just got to work harder, push everyone harder.
You mentioned just before, or worse, like, carry one of your mates out. Obviously, going into, that career that you were going into, you're going to be around people losing their life. So it's obviously part of the job and something you'd obviously expect to experience if you go into that line of work. But do you ever really get used to losing your mates?
I think most of the time, like, you're thinking about it happening to other people. You know what I mean? You're just preparing yourself for the fact that you're going to have to drop someone. That's it. That's part of it. Like, am I ready to do that? You know, have I got enough? And that, I think, was part of the struggle at the start. You're just going, part of this is going to mean that I've got to be able to do that and do it indifferently. It's just going to be it. You know what I mean? So, and I think that was the shocking thing with Josh, was I'd never like emotionally prepared for something like that in reality. You know, I mean, the power of a lot of the training is you've got to be able to do the same thing as you do with acting. You've got to truly, to get the most out of yourself, believe that you're in the scenario. So if you're doing a counter-terror thing, there's people's lives that are at stake, you know, and there's guys who are genuinely about to kill someone. They're going to kill them and they're going to keep doing that. You guys have got to bang in, blow into the job and basically find, fix and finish that task. You know, so you've really got to believe that you're there in all of those things. And I kind of found that parts of that bit of the training fun. You know what I mean? Like, you really get to, like, place yourself in that spot. But then when it becomes reality, it's always like that little step further. But then your first time in combat, you're not nervous, you're not anxious, you're kind of not relaxed, but
it sounds like from like your experience, Fiji, obviously you're mainly on that boat, had to go through that traumatic experience, and then Timor, you said you started to enjoy it. But when you were deployed over in Afghanistan, it sounds like things kind of went to the next level in terms of your active, you know, experience, right? How was your deployment in Afghanistan compared to anything you had experienced prior?
Well, it's like, so
obviously before the incident that happened, we'll get to that.
A lot of the stuff that happens is like reputation and what happens in the mess. You know what I mean? Like, the mess halls, that's the real proving ground. You know, like what's happening. And then there's people who you're hearing stories about, this guy did this or this guy did that, or, okay, let's, you know, so you'd start digging into these little bits that have happened in different places. And then, you know, when you get there, you're like, I don't want to disappoint my guys. And I still, this is where I have to prove myself. You know, not prove myself to myself. I've got to prove myself to them. You know, these are guys who've deployed before. You know, this is where you got to hold it together. And I mean, it's when you said you ride a snowboard or ski? Snowboard. Okay. So the first 3 days of snowboarding, you waste so much energy trying not to fall over. Yeah. Yeah. It's like that. You know, you're overthinking everything. You're double packing stuff.
You're just about, I want to give up. And then you just get up one last time and finally, I can at least get, you know, 100 meters before stacking.
Yeah, and day 3 you're ready to ride for Volcom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like that. You're just overthinking and overanalyzing everything. I remember that sort of feeling in it. And the cool thing was, the kid who was my gunner in my car, which is the one we got blown up in, we were always really like, just didn't get along type thing. Like, just not didn't get along, just professional differences. I don't know, but we were always at each other's throat. Like, it was like at the end of the trip, these guys are getting gloves on. You just knew it. It was going to happen. Everyone wanted to see it. But then when we got there, he sort of saw that. And he'd been there before. He's younger than me as well. And just, he was really cool. Like, hey, man, so when we're setting up the car, there's this and this and this. And we do that and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, like, people are asking us when we're getting married. So you two guys, you've been bickering for like 12 months, like at each other's throat. Every single time there's anything, like, what's the weather going to be? You two guys would argue about it. And then you get over here and now all of a sudden you're like spooning each other. What changed? And it was just, and that was a really good lesson in like leadership. And like, so here's a good example of it as well, of his level of like thinking and what I think really does well in complex situations. We crested over these 2 hills. This is early in the piece too. We'd only had like minimal amount of contacts before that. And an RPG, it literally looked like a gridiron coming at the car next to us, but it hit the berm just in front of them. So we're like, the Mag 58, he's got this like a Mark 19. It fires 40 mil grenades and just launches them in an auto mode. So you go thump, thump, thump. He would fire them, and I saw where it came from. So I'd picked my I had like a Para Mark 48, which is like a 7.62. It's like a Minimi. It's like an automatic belt-fed weapon. Yep. and I've just put it on the bit next to the steering wheel and just dropped like a mag in like, I think I had a 50 round mag on it, 5 bursts maybe. And then typically what you do is you just call stoppage, and every time you've done it, you're inside or you're doing something. So your first action was to move it up, drop it into your thing and fix the stoppage like that. So I did that. I feel this dunk on my head. Okay, cool. So I wiggled it, moved it a bit, and then like back into covering. All right, we moved down and moved away. And like you can hear what's happening. I felt the dunk on my head but didn't know what it was, and just was like sort of adjusted a bit. And he pulls us out the back of the car when we moved into a safer spot. She goes, "Oh man, come here." I said, "Yeah." "What?" And he's like, "Dude, when you did your stoppage drill, you lifted your barrel straight up into the line of the Mark 19. Like if I didn't hear you call stoppage, you didn't say you did that, like that could have popped our whole car. It's like, you got to pay attention to that shit, man." And he was just, and like he didn't say it to, he didn't go to like our 2IC, he didn't go to like Boydie, he didn't go to like our team commander or anything like that. He just pulled me to the back of the car and said that. Like, there's that. And I was like, that's pretty, okay. I got it after it. It made so much sense, except every time I drilled it or we drilled it, that was the stoppage drill because it shakes all the crap out of the barrel. You can load your next rounds on, close it, cock, get ready. So yeah, it's but like just being for him, just donk, reaching over, hitting that adjusts it. End of contact. Nothing's happened that's that serious besides the car next to us almost getting blown up. But yeah, like do that, and then you kind of like I learned more about just being aware, situationally aware in that space from that than I would have if someone goes, like if he had have gone to my team commander gets me and sits me down and goes, all right, so 3-6, this has happened. He's calm, he's told me this, and this is blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's just not going to get the best result from me. You know what I mean? Like, him pulling me aside, and then that's, then you're looking out for each other, but then you're doing it that little bit more type thing.
Had you been fired upon or fired at in Timor, or was Afghanistan the first time?
Afghanistan was the first time, yeah.
What's it like? Because you know the training and preparation. What's it like for the first time when you're under fire? And another thing, you're under like mortar.
Yeah,
well
that was the this is, oh my God. So we've been driving for days, like 2 days, I think, before we hit this spot. We're on the side of a little hill and escarpment or whatever you want to call it. And everyone has drawn like a number out for picket. So they're like, our team's starting the picket, and it was kind of like one of those things that you're like, okay, cool. So we're starting the picket. We'll do this. All right, we'll put a thing in. I drag it out 6 arm first. Cool. So I was thinking, right, I'm going to get some sleep here because I'll be able to go down, do my picket for an hour and a half. It was the daytime still at that stage. So I'm wearing like shorts, a shirt with my armor, like the bare minimum that you had to be on picket. Right, because we're in the middle of nowhere.
So on picket is like on watch.
You're on watch, yeah. So we're at the furthest bit of like we had a VDO, like a vehicle drop off point, where the vehicles are all harbored up in like a defensive position. But it was a pretty like open, except we also had enough firepower and we could see far enough, especially with all the tools that we had, to like if you want to attack us, you're just in trouble. Like you got to bring a lot of people because we're packing some serious firepower, like.
How many do you think would have been in the group you were with?
We had at least 90 shooters.
Okay.
It's like, like it's a decent, 24 shooters, 24, 90, maybe 100 in different vehicles. And then a couple of support elements. Like there's a lot. And then there's cars where there's like us three. We had a Mag 58, the automatic, the Mark 19, and then I've got my own weapon. And then if you get past that, you've got the short arms that each person's got. And then if that goes wrong, you've got pistols. They could have literally come over the hill with 500 guys running and screaming. And you could have. And we still would have just, you know what I mean? Like just breathe fire on them. But so I'm sitting there and I didn't hear it. Like I thought I heard the first bit of it. It's like that. And every now and then they do something over there that they were used to. Like people who deployed before were used to that as a first time you're not. So I'd be like, maybe it's a test fire? So I was like, and then you hear the, hey, Dave. Yeah, he comes down. And I said, what? Are our mortars test firing? What's happening there? He's gone, what? I've gone, look, there's a little donut cloud that's starting, and then a bit closer, like not a heap closer, but far enough, just went. I was just like, oh, whoa. And he's like, we're on line OT, which basically means that you're like, they're just walking shots onto you. So it's a matter of time until it gets to you. And the one downfall of having that much firepower and being in cars like that is you're not really mobile. Like if they were really good with their mortars, even though we're spread out, they're probably going to get a couple of numbers. You know what I mean? So I remember going back and the poor kid who'd been so good. I like, hey, man, don't freak out, but we're getting mortared. I remember I saw so much white in his eyes. Like he's literally gone from, I think, being asleep to like, it was like, get excited. Like he's kind of like doing that. And then we're reeling stuff up and he was hooking in. I remember like I had like helmet on, we're down, we're ready to go. Like by that stage, I think I still wasn't in full cams. I was just ready to go. I had my weapon. I was next to the vehicle. I was taking as much cover. And that was kind of a scary feeling because you hear this whistle in before they go boof. So like it's almost like you're in a thing. You're like, okay. And then someone's like, oh, they don't pull the pin out or something like that. And I remember like being up against the side of a car going, Jesus Christ, okay, we're in it now. And then I look across and there's these other two teams like back at the card table.
And they're just
they're already there, yeah. So apparently there'd been a call come over the radio. I don't know whether in all the thing I'd switched channel or something had happened. There's a call coming over the radio that our interpreters, because we can hear what they say because it's not, World War II. They it just basically said they only had 3 rounds.
Okay.
So they'd fired all 3 rounds. We've got to the stand to. The third one was the one they didn't pull the pin on, and then I was like, oh, okay, well they haven't got any more unless we hear any more. I was like, so that's it.
So yeah, it's a bit.
Yeah, and that was it for that one.
So how far away are they firing these mortars from?
I don't even know. I don't even know at that stage. Like that was a real, I can only see what I need to moment. You know what I mean? Like I remember something so vividly. I remember the adrenaline of this is it. This is it type thing. It had me.
Now you're at war. Like
we're in. Here we go. And then it was like it was a false start type thing, you know what I mean?
Did you have much contact with like the Australian with the locals, or did they kind of keep their space from you? Like how you guys, like obviously some would have imagine hated yous, was some sort of like how was the energy and the tension in the region at that time?
A lot of it was, especially at that stage with where we were in our development as a task element, it was like you'd rock up and the women and children would leave. Like, and then it was kind of like, if it was the Taliban control, it would be like guys who want to fight would stay. And then you'd just be like, it's a matter of time. And then when it's going dusk, that period in between like sunset and dark is when they could hit. Because that's when it's sort of as neutral as possible. That neutralizes night vision a little bit. You know what I mean? Like there's no point in having it on, but you still can't really see with it off. So you can kind of get away with a few of those little pot shots. So you'd know it's coming at nighttime each time you're sort of doing it. And you get used to those. Like,
so how long were you actually in Afghanistan for? And were you there once or twice, like before?
Once. That was it. That was it.
How long?
6 weeks.
6 weeks, and then
So
what was it? What was the date? I think it was the 3rd of April.
Yeah.
I think 2009.
Yeah, 09.
You obviously, again, the injuries that you went through, so close to losing your life. Obviously, you don't remember much of that night yourself, but pieces like explain it for me and the people that don't haven't heard you kind of piece that story together. From what you've been able to piece together, speaking to everyone that does remember the night, what were the events that transpired that obviously changed the rest of your life?
So I actually did a production job last year with called Service, where we got people in and interviewed them for like 45 minutes. And that was one of the first times I've heard start to finish what happened from the perspective of one of our recon boys that night. And most of the guys, I thought that I was protecting by not asking them so they don't have to go back there. They all thought they were protecting me by not telling me, but wanted to tell me. So we both wanted to have the conversation. You know, I had it with like a friend, Ian Turner, he took his life in 2017. And when we'd finally got to the stage where we were going to talk to each other about it, I said, man, I just didn't want you to have to, because I knew that he got like woken up the next morning and had blood all over him. And I was like, I didn't want you to have to relive that. And he's kind of like, man, I didn't want you to have to relive it. And I'm like, I still don't have it. Like, literally, it's not there. And he's like, oh. So he ran through. So we get a group of orders that you get like a sort of an overlay of what the village looks like. We get the group of orders, we get a set of compounds, and from those compounds, there were 2 of them that were highlighted that the other platoon were going to walk into. So we knew where their vehicle drop-off location was. We were essentially moving in for support if they needed it, because we'd heard that there was reports that there may be like 15 to 20 guys. You know, if they get too heavy into it, we can then sort of move on their position. It gets broken down into smaller bits of how they're going to deal with it. And then the recon guy we dealt with, Dicko, was like, he in the orders group said, boss, look, there's a little section of these rocks where it kind of funnels us through. We need to sweep it. And the boss goes, look, what's your fascination with sweeping hills? And it was his first deployment. But hearing him say it was just wild. But he goes, oh, it's my first deployment. I just thought, okay, cool. And like, to give you an idea of this boss, one of the first contacts we were in, I'm like still hearing 762 go, and he's just casually ambling over to the car, just holding his rifle in the middle of it. And he's go, all right, boys, he's with his Welsh bloke. All right, boys, and blah, blah, blah. And he'd go through his little thing with it. But yeah, he said that. And then we didn't even know at the end of the group, we actually had an asset that could have swept and may have found it. But yeah, so it's period of darkness. So we're in nighttime as well. Like, period of darkness is no moon, no sun. You know, and that's when night vision's most effective because there's minimal amount of ambient light. So we're moving up, and then you're driving each other's wheel tracks because minimizes your footprint, and you know you're doing everything you can. And somehow it's like fifth car or something over that through that same spot, and then boom. He said he saw the car lift up and it turned like 90 degrees and back down. Like, I've got a picture of the hill the next day, and the crate is enormous. So it went off like right there. My right leg was gone. I don't know whether, I think it was out of the car. I can't remember. Like, for some reason, the moment where everyone found me in the rubble isn't the most talked about part. Like, I've got bits from, like, the guy who was next to me, knocked him out, and the gearbox ended up pretty much where his seat was, and he was folded out. But I still don't know. I think I was out of the car. I can't remember. But, yeah, and then I was trying to breathe. So, like you hear that. So blood was pouring down my throat from my nose being shattered. Like, it got it really badly. And a couple of splits here, but, like, nothing too hectic. And, yeah, that was the sort of thing. We got to get over and then stabilize him. So he had his eardrum blown out. So the kid in the back. He got the tourniquet on my leg. He also, one of the boys, he turns when we were talking about it, right? We're at Coogee. We're having this chili pizza that neither of us could give in on, but it was just so hot. Like, my mouth is still burning from it, and this is in 2016. And, yeah, like, we're just sitting there eating it, both sweating because of this chili, talking to each other about it. And he goes, there was this one moment, but where – because, like, in a situation like that, everyone wants to be the hero and save the day. But you're only useful for a particular period of time, and sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing. You know what I mean? You'll be called in when it's necessary. Beyond that, don't clutter the scene. You know, try and help out what you can, but Instinctively do what you got to do. And he said he was just like kneeling down looking out because we could hear the village kept talking about shooting at the light because at that stage they're going to like headlamps. It's like, he's going to die. We've got to risk a big white light on a hill or he's dead. Yeah. That we can't do this under like Ninox, like night vision. We just can't do it. And they're saying like from the village, they go, we'll shoot at the light. We'll shoot at the light. See, our guys are gearing up. We've got guys with 84s ready to launch into those compounds. The reality of this is if they'd have launched into the compounds, air support wouldn't have come to pick me up because there's only one guy injured. If they're in the middle of a firefight and we're that close to where the target is, I would just be dead. One round. So that takes one guy just going, I'm going to drop just this guy. Off. That's it. And then I'm dead. Everyone held back. Like everyone held it. And then he goes, I was kneeling down, like looking at the village. And then I heard you make this like just awful scream. Like it was this really bad sound. And I just like started to feel, I was just like, okay, he's dying. Like this is the end. He's heard it. He goes, I've heard it before. And that was it for you. And then the kid goes, he's still got his nuts. So we got my nuts caught in the tourniquet because of how high my thing was, and then and that was the sound because I like
last thing you needed.
Yeah, tourniquet my nuts to my thing, and like I chatted to a couple of guys about it, and it got far enough down that I was sort of like, all right, I want to know what was it like. Like, did I take it well? Was I a bitch? Was I screaming for mum? What was happening? And they were like, no, you actually like seemed pretty like you were tough through it. Like it was pretty good, man. Like, so to be honest, a lot of respect.
Personal recollection of that.
I've tried to find it too. Like, you know, you've done all the like both arts, everything in arts. You want to do it. You try to get there.
Try and get there.
And I can't. I've had a few times where I think it's maybe similar, but they're all black. Everything's black when that's happening because it's dark. I haven't got night vision on.
Did you like have like a massive concussion afterwards?
Yeah, I had a closed head injury. But apparently that's when I would get bad. So when they would go, okay, cool, we've got to turn the night vision off for a second. They're going to isolate. There's people leaving this compound and doing that. They'll click it off and I'll be like, that's it, you know.
When it's completely black.
Yeah, I'm left alone in the dark. And he said like he's put his hands and showed me what it was like. I was trying to punch him and I had, this arm was in a weird S-bend. This elbow's hanging out. And it was just like sort of that like thing. Said you were doing that. He had me in like a mount position with his knee somewhere in my hip, told me on the ground because I kept wiggling, trying to run away. I was just trying to get away. At the minute that it went black, and then because someone told me at mount, I'm trying to punch him. So I'm throwing arms at him, screaming and carrying on apparently. But then the hardest one, Turns had to do this. Or he didn't have to. They were carrying me over to the chopper. And I'm on one of the little bed things.
Do you know how long it took the chopper to get there?
Just less than an hour, like 56 minutes.
So you're lying on the floor for 56 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, I'm imagining morphine pretty heavily by that stage.
Yeah.
But still not enjoying it. And my arms were out. They like got me just laying there. And then the pilots just said like, for him to get on, he's got to have his arms strapped across his chest. And he's like pointing to my elbow hanging out. And the other arm busted. And he's like, no. Kind of give him that signal. He reckons he looked at me and just said, I'm sorry, man. Picked it up and strapped it. And he said, I was making
the sounds that would have been making.
Yeah, well. Just crepitus, just bones grinding together. Yeah, put that across. Then I apparently was making a bit of a racket. But, I mean, that's the thing. I wake up and I sort of remember waking up in Germany. Sort of.
So talking to the boys that were there, were they thinking that
he's gone?
Yeah,
he's done. Like, Turn said the last thing he did was literally say goodbye. Like he put my arms across me and just he went laid down in like a sort of fetal position with the blood still over him. He couldn't even get changed, and he's like, because I really looked up to Turns. Like he was way more. He'd been a contractor. He'd done a heap of stuff. Wasn't a heap older, but just I had a heap of respect for him as an operator and just as a person. He was just cool. And like, you know, that comes through, that bit of the relationship. Plus the teams that are working, you've spent all of your time working with. You know, like they're your immediate family in the Defence Force type thing, you know, and you're trying not to catastrophize it, but we haven't seen anything like this. It's like, okay. And then, by all accounts, the next day, like, we heard all the different things. I don't know whether the vision that I've got of the women and children leaving was that village. I can't remember. You'd have to ask one of the other boys that's got less fragmented of a memory from there. But the next day, rather than doing a like nighttime raid on one compound, they were like, we heard enough. We're sending everyone in.
Yeah.
Like, they just unleashed hell. It was and especially that's a lot of angry guys just going, we're pretty sure that we're going to have to explain why this guy's family have got a flag on their mantle. Yeah. So
you mentioned as well, we spoke earlier in the chat about, you know, everything happening for a reason or whatever. You being the 5th car in the convoy.
Yeah.
4 cars before you would have been likely that close to.
Yeah. Well, I had to ask. That was one of the first ones.
How's the 5th car, you know?
Well, we think, right, because there's like rocks and you can't exactly see the wheel track. You sort of got to line it up. You know, you're under night vision as well. I mean, I had to say to, like, Boyd, his name is Tim Boyd, great guy. Next to me, he's out of the army now, so I can say it. And I'm still getting used to being able to give him the credit that he deserves. Like, it's not often. Like, there's other guys who are still in that you'd like to be able to explain who the guys were that saved your life. But he's one that I can say, which is great. And like, I had to say to him in one session, like, man, tell me, you got to be honest. You got to be honest. And like, we're 8 beers deep at this. You've got to be honest. So you better be. I'm like, man, did I fall asleep? Like, was it me? And he goes, no, man. I'm like, honestly, I didn't even do it. You didn't. You did nothing wrong. Then just all of a sudden, boom. Okay, cool. Like, I mean, and the realities are as well, we may not have found it if we were sweeping. Like, they were stacking these old Russian anti-tank mines that don't have, most of them is like a urethane. So to find the metal in it, it wasn't like a standard IED of here's 2 saw blades with foam between them type thing. This was pretty specific to destroy a tank. And there were 2 of them on top of each other. So we don't know whether you would have found it. Like,
yeah, like that's a good point. I just know myself, and this is obviously the elite commando mentality is very different to like a everyday civilian. But one thing I would struggle to reconcile is like the fact that someone said, hey, if we're going to search one spot, we should search this spot. and then it not happening. Was that something that took a bit of time to reconcile, or were you just like immediately, I have to, in order to move on?
All right. So, like, I found that out. You know, sometimes people will tell you stuff and you don't know whether they're telling the truth. You got to piece a lot of stuff together. Like, when I got put back into an office job, I couldn't remember anything. Like, I couldn't remember anything. I could read a book. I could read a paragraph of something and then put the book down, change my train of thought, come back 2 minutes later and just not remember a thing about it, just anything. And it murdered me. But then people are telling stories about it. I'd be like, I'm a smart enough guy to know that was out of place. Why are you telling me this? We wouldn't have found, like, and I remember the boss made a point of saying we wouldn't have found the thing. I'm like, okay, so we weren't sweeping. And I never knew it. I didn't, and it wasn't until he'd said it. And mind you, by the time I've heard this, we did in 2009, late 2009, we'd done a winter sports camp. I rode a snowboard again and just like really enjoying it. Then I hadn't really met a huge amount of famous people. Like, when you're in the army, your job is to not be. You know, your job is for no one to be able to know what you're doing in that role. You know, you've got a protected identity. There was no Facebook. There's nothing that you can do with that. Or you could have Facebook. You knew everyone who was on my Facebook at that time who was in the army had a really weird name. You know what I mean? Like, who the hell is Adismo Spectalot? You know what I mean? Like, cool. Yeah. There's a group of guys who all seem reasonably well built, who seem to drink a lot, that are all, it wouldn't have taken a genius to work out who. But you're not supposed to do that. And I remember Ray Martin came down and I thought I was in the presence of royalty. You know, it was just the coolest thing. And then they were going to do one on everyone that had been hurt, and they ended up doing this piece just on me. And they ran it alongside, I think Mark Latham at the time was just public enemy number one. And they were like, imagine this shit guy's an Australian. What a jerk. And then they had mine. And it kind of came across in a really good way. Like, Ray is an amazing, like, human presenter and interviewer. His producer, Sean Devitt, put it together. And being able to go behind the curtain for the first time was just amazing. But, like, that in itself would have almost been enough. But then I get to see the good side in everyone. You know, like, people would come. I've got this yellow book that people sign when they were in hospital, when I was in hospital. Everyone who I'd known when I'd grown up, been friends with, everyone came in to visit and would sign this book. Hey, man, how you doing? Like, good to see you. And we'd be telling stories about when we were kids or, like, and everyone wanted to help me out in some way. You know, you all of a sudden you got a seat at the table. By the time I'd been told that, well, we could have done that, I was like, and then I'd still be in Afghanistan. You know what I mean? Like, we could have maybe, but like I had too much of the good side, like what it could be. You know what I mean?
Probably better that you found out when you did rather than...
I probably would have blocked it out. Even if I did, I was so proud of being a commando. Like, I still am, you know. It just is, you know, it's something that, you know, you can't undo the fact that you got to that. And to me, that was the difference between the guy I didn't like and the guy I did. That was the time I really learned what it meant to just be me and be comfortable being me. You know, I'd achieved something that I was proud enough with. You know, did you find, like, through, say, when you were having your evolution through business, you had a couple of things that, you know, where you really found a moment where you were just like, okay, that's it. You just sort of sat into it and you said, this is who Dylan is. All right, cool. And then all of a sudden, like, some things you look back shamefully and go, oh my God, I could have carried myself better there. And then, but then you kind of like, you got to, for me, that the job was that.
Yeah.
You know, and then the little lessons that it taught. So it's, yeah, it was, I can't be mad at him. I mean, if they ever get mad at me for something, I'll be able to go, but he really should have swept the hill. But yeah, I mean.
Yeah. It's not going to do you any good by having that mentality. As someone that, and I'm not sure if you've spoken about this or shared your opinions on this before, whatever, as someone that was there on the ground who was pretty much as close to you can come as losing your life in Afghanistan, what was your thoughts of like the way that the US left Afghanistan?
Whatever, withdrawal.
Withdrawal overnight, leaving.
It wasn't overnight. It was like a 5-year.
Okay.
Yeah, like it was a last 5 years. Okay. It was a massive wind down of the way they'd done it. Yeah. Like the fact that it seemed like it was pretty abrupt. And I mean, it's probably disappointing when like people look and go, oh, the Taliban are taking back over. Like we weren't there to fight just Taliban, right? Like we were there for an Al-Qaeda network that were basically farming heroin. We were there to disrupt one of the major world supplies of heroin. That was what was funding their side of the war on terror. So it's a disruption operation. It's not ultimately a win or lose type thing. I think I remember like looking at it when it happened. I rang like Tim, the guy who was next to me. I just go, man, people are getting really annoyed on social media about it. And I don't give a fuck. Is there something wrong with me? And he's like, man, I don't really care either. I said, yeah, I know. Like, and that's the thing. We've lost friends there. I've seen what it can do, just tearing the hearts out of families. You know, and that's something that we've all got to like live with. But at the end of the day, it was like we weren't there to like fix Afghanistan. We're disrupting a network. You know, it would be nice to live in the world where you could, but you need generational change to do that, and that's a 60-year commitment. You know, so I've never really looked at it like that. I know a lot of people were getting very upset when they at the leave. Like, I mean, you sort of think people who live there, they're the real victims in it. You know what I mean? Like, getting by no other fault that you were born there. That's it. You know what I mean? And there's horrors on women, children. Like, it's a really old school tribal mentality, which makes it really easy, you know, when you know that kids are getting or whatever, and that they're not, it's just part of their culture or what have you. Yeah. you know, it makes it really easy to sit on our side of the bargaining table. But yeah, it just is. I know it didn't bother me.
You speak about being so proud to be a commando, right? When you wake up in Germany and obviously you have like, you know, bleeding on your brain and massive concussion, but then like when you start to come through enough to realize that and start comprehending, okay, I think I'm going to survive here. And you realize that, you know, like what made you be able to be a commando was your physical abilities, and realizing that that's probably not going to be an option for me. How was that identity crisis in like the early stages afterwards, or was it just about survival?
You can't think enough at that stage. Germany, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever thought, I'm going to die here. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm alive. Like, let's keep doing it. You know, I was still like smiling and making jokes with people coming in, and
Well, famous all the photos of you in the beds and stuff.
yeah,
like,
smiling and shit. Yeah,
spirits.
Lunatic. Hey, there's a screw.
It takes a certain type of person to be a commando, I think.
Yeah, so. I mean, I don't know. It's like I know that to put you in the idea, like the mindset, but I remember being in the ICU. This is one of the few memories I've got from ICU in Australia. In a bowl account, I had like a traumatic amnesia, and you know, people can be really, really aggressive and nasty. Like, I can string words together as well. Like I can really upset someone if I want to. And I had that ability. Like one, I still didn't know what way was up, but I remember calling my girlfriend in at the time, having a sit down and getting really serious. This is the moment I've got to tell her. I'm like, hey, you know, so I've just come to grips with the fact that I've lost my legs. And she did the same thing you just did, and grinned. And I'm like, is this funny? I almost did the Pesci thing. Am I a clown? Like, is this, you know, I'm sort of like, and that was the headspace I was in. I was just like, just no, this is the third time you've given me the same speech. I had no idea. Like I was rehearsing it in my mind before she walked in.
And you've had this conversation.
And I've done it before. So that's like where my mind was. But then my dad was pretty happy. He's like, you always fell back on what you could fall back on. We've always had this weird thing. He got English, I got maths.
Yeah.
Whatever he does well, like sport, he always had to work really hard. Sport, I got born with it. You know, like it's always been that sort of thing. Anything that you work hard at, like English is something that you've got to keep grinding at. Maths to me, it just makes sense. So we've always had that. And he goes, you're in a spot now because now you have to use your brain. And I was like, I think the hard bit was dawning, like at that stage going, all right now I'm 28 or 29 years old. Everyone who I'm going to be competing against, if I do a degree, takes 4 years. I'm going to be 33. And this is like, I could still put it all together, but then I couldn't remember it 10 minutes down the track. I was like, okay, so I'm going to be 33 against guys who've already worked their way up through this system that is so far ahead. Ugh. You know, I mean, and I was financially stable. Like I had everything that I needed to have. Like, and that's the weird thing. In my life, I'd grown up going the same model as my dad took, which is you buy a house, you pay the house off, eventually you kind of get the car that you want when you don't have to compromise on kids, and then, you know, you sell the house. That's your goal, is to buy the house. I had all of it in a day. Like, the house paid for, the car, like the unit paid for. Like my dream car, like literally dream car of that time, was an A4. That was the level I looked at. That was I thought I was balling too. Like just crushing it in my A4. Just this black A4, just like as if I was Jason Statham or something like that. I saw him in London once. I was at the Soho Hotel in the air near Southern Afghanistan. It's so good. You know, there's the bar down the bottom. The entry, you look to the right, there's the bar. I'm up against it talking to this American guy. I'm drinking Manhattans, just thinking, I'm crushing it.
In your James Bond.
Yeah, pretty much. I was having that moment. I was I was absolutely ready. I'm pretty sure I was wearing the roller at the time as well. And I was like, okay, cool. Here we go. Oh, I'm doing that. I'm having a combo. And I got up to go to the toilet. And this is all on the way to the airport to fly back to the States after doing something in Spain. And I'm like walking along, and I see this guy that makes eye contact with us. And I look, and I must have gone, like, and he probably gets it a lot.
Yeah,
like,
for sure, of course.
And I just, it's Jason Statham. And I had that, and he gave like just this cheeky grin on his way past. And as I kept walking, I'm just like, he's probably the coolest guy ever. You know what I mean? Like, but then in my mind, I'm like, oh, I should say I'm the war guy. I should get like, see if he wants to have 2 minutes worth of a chat. But I just left it, went back there, and then sat back next to this American guy.
That like the mindset and the way that you've approached everything is like, it's like you say all these things like they're just little blips in the radar that come up, and you just handle everything in your stride. But like for me, and like as long as I have a goal to focus on, like I'm good. So as soon as I lose direction, that's when my mind will start to go.
It's hard. Yeah.
How quickly did you have to like figure out, okay, why do I need to be able to do all these things again? How quickly did you click back into gear to be like, I need to recover, I need to do this because this is gonna. Or is it just like second nature to someone who's in the commando to be wired like that?
Yeah, just do it. Like it was, everything was happening too slowly as well. Like I got bad ADD at the best of times. It's why my stories go for so long. Like I can't, there's nothing I can do. And I'm eventually getting to a point. I just don't know how I'm getting there. I just sort of feel it out. Yeah, eventually. Yeah, a million edits later. But then like it was the same thing when recovering, nothing was quick enough. I wanted prosthetic legs on before my legs had healed, and then
how long did it take you to start walking again?
6 weeks. It's nothing.
6 weeks. I know. I saw Yui's face. That was my face when I saw that too.
It was like,
and you're saying things took too long.
It did. I had shit to do.
6 weeks from that to
my guys were coming off the plane. I had a 3.5 months from point of injury to them departing the plane. And I'm like, you're going to play the game well, I'm going to get there. I'm going to be the first thing they see when they get off the plane. I owe that to them. You
would see those photos and you think that's like a 12-month recovery at least.
It's nothing. Like it was crazy too. But I think because of like what everyone had been through, like physically to get there, your body just gets used to dealing with stuff. You know what I mean? Like a marathon runner, his body will get used to recovering at a shorter rate than most people's. I think that the levels of trauma that you put yourself through, shock and trauma, something like that's just, yeah.
Speaking about that sort of like trauma, right? We spoke about, you've had, I'm sure, numerous friends and people that you serve with that have ended up taking their own lives, post their experiences, PTSD, the mental health stuff. You've spoken, obviously, that there's more than these two reasons, but there's two reasons that you've spoken about why you could never do that. Number one, you don't want to let the person that buried that.
Yeah, he's not winning.
He's not winning.
Yeah.
And two, for all your mates that, experience trauma, seeing your blood, bones and, everything all over the place that, risk their lives and put themselves through that experience, for then to you to get back 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line to be like, it's
too
disrespectful for them. Right?
It is. You know what I mean? They gave part of their soul to do that, and this actually, again, it goes back to turns. They were having a do. I think I was probably drunk in my place that I lived in at Coogee. And I got to messaging with him, and they were down in the pavilion. I spoke to him, and I remember him going like, bro, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to get in by the sound of you. So don't worry about it. We'll catch up later or something like that. And then hung up. And I remembered that I sort of felt like I was on the outside. Yeah. Things had calmed down in the corporate world. I wasn't getting box tickets to everything anymore. And I remember like just going, I sent something to him that had a message come back. Don't be a f***ing idiot. I didn't spend an hour on the side of a f***ing hill in the middle of Afghanistan to save your life so you could f***ing take it. You blah, 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 blah. Yeah. In that exact, I could hear him saying it. You know what I mean? And then like every now and then you kind of need to be bumped back on course. And like, I don't think that I was like in a mindset that was going to be the way it would go. I think it was just having a bit of a sad moment of, I'm at home and everyone else is out. So, you know what I mean? And then, yeah.
What's your thoughts on that as someone that have, gone through some of the most traumatic experiences anyone has? Obviously, you would say the people that were there with you have, but do you think what's being done is enough? Like, what would you love to see be done to help, the returned soldiers that, have experienced these things today? Because we think of diggers and we think of like the World War I and II veterans and they're old, but like the people that have served in the last 10, 20 years have seen at times just as traumatic things, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's crazy because I've seen this through like the Vietnam era as well. You know, you have some guys who are still in the Vietnam era. Then you've got some guys who just, they're business magnates. Like we did an interview with one guy who owns he was Mr. Juicy, owns a winery down in the Barossa, and he's just come out of it and just crushed it. I think it's the same with now. There's no like one size fits all sort of solution. You know what I mean? The best thing that you can do is encourage people to do well. I've got 3 mates that had committed suicide. One of them had tried for Ian, like Turns had tried 4 times. Like we knew it was coming, but like each time we'd always try and work a way out to convince him that, like, because we got heavily in contact the last year that he was alive. He was in and out of different places trying to like look after him, but at the end of the day, his proudest thing was being a soldier, and he was good at it. And they'd been taken away. His head just couldn't help it anymore. Like he just couldn't do it. So it was, and that was the thing. Like at the end of the day, you kind of were like, I don't know what more we could do. You know, I had one, we played a charity golf day at Moore Park together. It was like, oh, will you come and talk to the business class that we've got, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, no worries. I'll see what I can do. We'll chat to my manager. We'll make something happen or whatever. And then then the next thing I know, it's like, oh, Caps killed himself. I'm like, how close to Jesus? And then I was at one of my old mates' weddings in Boracay in the Philippines. And I remember like one of the boys rang us. She goes, hey man, how you doing? I'm like, pretty good. And he goes, yeah, she's going to say like Jude's dead. I said, what? I was talking to him a week ago. He's talking about opening a whiskey bar up in like, what's the joint called? Airlie Beach. It's just back from Airlie Beach. What's it called? For some reason, the name's escaping me at the moment. But yeah, he was looking at doing that. And I'm like, ugh. So I've still got the text messages in my phone, but in all those circumstances, I don't know if there's a way that you could change it or do anything. You know, I mean, the best thing you can do is give someone every tool possible. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like sometimes it can be, and that's why I've been so fortunate. Like I've f***ed up heaps. You know what I mean? I've done dumb shit. And you know what I mean? Like, and then had people just go, just this time I had a benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? People can do dumb, like within reason, do something dumb. Like when you're obviously, yeah, well within reason. But like, you know, you said this to that person or stuff that normally would be a relationship ending thing. And you're just like, okay, like, sort it out, man. You know what I mean? Okay, cool. Let's work through that. I think like that's probably the best thing that you can do towards veterans. Just give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, there's not a way, but it's the same with everyone, I think. You know, like everyone's got something happening from somewhere. You know what I mean? I think that's being injured. I get to see that really nice side of people where, you know, they naturally do. Like I didn't understand. You'd be sitting down and they go, you okay, man? You'd be like, yes. It is 2:00 on a Sunday. We're at the Coogee Bay Hotel and I have a beer in my hand. I'm fine. How are you? And then they'd like put a hand on my shoulder and go, but are you really okay? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I don't, you know, they're prosthetics, but I'm still me.
Yeah.
I don't.
Anyone that knows you knows that. Like,
yeah, it was just some of those were weird, but I think that's sort of maybe the hand that some other people.
Was that in a weird adjustment period to be treated so differently? Like you. Yeah. How was that mentally for you?
Well, yeah, like, I mean, you still feel like you.
Yeah.
You're like, I still feel like me. I don't know how. But I think eventually I almost detached from me, if that makes sense. And then was just like, I'm going to be this new person and do it that way and just have to fit in. And I have to fit in and there's bits of it that he says and that he does and stuff. And then I think it wasn't until probably 2019, it's just like now the two people can meet.
Wow.
I guess. Sort of like that.
Yeah.
You know, like I and especially say with public engagements or charity work or stuff like that, I was doing everything I could. Then at that stage is like, unless it's a hell yes, it's a no type thing. And then, you know, if I was doing a lot of stuff for the military out of what I felt was obligation, and then just started to just go, okay, I'm going to now do things that work.
You do a lot of stuff, particularly on like Anzac Day with the Roosters, right? How did that all come up?
Sometimes you just walk into the right room. I mean, Aaron Glenane was the teacher that got me Hacksaw Ridge because he was on his third callback and he didn't even get a part.
Wow, and he's the one that's...
Yeah, he just goes, man, they're casting something now. You've got to get in touch with Nicky Barrett. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I spoke to my manager. He wrote a letter. Next thing I'm reading. And, yeah, then the rest is history. But, like, you sort of got to be in that room, I guess. Where did I start that? Sorry?
The Roosters, how did it come up doing all that?
So, and I went to a cafe in Bondi that doesn't exist anymore. And I remember walking in there. There's a guy who goes, like, a thick accent. And I'm not going to try and do it. But he just goes, I know you. And I'm like, really? Like, and that, I get that occasionally. Like, not often, but occasionally. This is 2012.
Been on the news.
Yeah, I'd done a fair bit of stuff in that. Yeah. I was like that. And especially with the walk that I had, I would try and cover the limp and still wear jeans, but you could see it. And he just goes, 60 minutes. You know, I'd recognize that smile anyway. And he goes, I'm Israeli Special Forces. And then we spoke about that. And then I remember going to pay, and he was like, your money's no good here. I'm like, my money's good everywhere. Like, all right. And at that stage, that was one of the things that I would do. I would like to cover it up. I would pay too much for whatever I was doing because I felt like I could just throw it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was my flex, the extra round of cocktails for everyone or something like that type of mentality. So I was so intolerant. I went over. I ended up I think I got to pay for it. But then I went back and he goes, look, I'll do you a deal. You can just pay costs. You have $5. You do whatever you want. You just pay me $5 and that's fine. I was like, okay. And then that was the same deal that Adam Ashley Cooper, Buddy Franklin when he went there, Todd Sampson, the whole Roosters team. So I'd been there for, and I'd then go there sort of daily from my place in Bondi. And, yeah, I remember going there one day. And he's like, so you like the Roosters, right? I said, yeah. And you look around, there's Roosters memorabilia. And he goes, see that table out the front? I said, yeah. And it was the 2013 Roosters side. All came in, sat down. So I got a photo of me out the front with them, and then it sort of grew from there. They had me in for a talk on Anzac Day one year, and yeah, we did two or three different things with them. I mean, since then I've spoken to the Bulldogs. So first was the Para Eels. First was the first group that I did. It was when Jared Haynen headbutted the dude, so I got to spend a bit of time with him. Nathan Hindmarsh was still captain. We did them, the Roosters, the Bulldogs. A thing out at Panthers, I did a little bit of stuff with their team. The North Queensland Cowboys opened the season for them. Yeah. The Australian team, I did a talk near Hyde Park for their team. And then again, I opened the Anzac Day match, which is pretty cool in Brisbane because a lot of them were Roosters and they're from both sides. So you had half of New Zealand and half of Australia was sort of hugging you after you did the talk. So it was...
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. And then Geelong in the AFL. Geelong, there was an interesting one because I didn't know who Joel Selwood was, and he's really popular. And then the last one was the Melbourne Demons, just before Anzac Day this year. And they're hard because the hard thing is they're all high-performing athletes. They didn't just fall there. Yeah. You know, they're literally at the top of a really fucking pointy tree. So how do you then walk in and, how do you add value? How do you add value to that room?
They're elite already, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, anything I could tell you already know. There's nothing to do with the Special Forces that there is a guy in this room who can't do. You know what I mean? You chose something different. It's pretty much as simple as that. And so I was like, okay, the only thing I could do then was go, the reason why you're important is. So when I was writing the piece for them, which was like a 45-minute talk, it was like every time I go back to it, the same as like the acting lesson, the reason why this matters is type thing. I'd do that. Okay, the reason you're important is. So playing in the Anzac Day match, there's ceremony that goes around and stuff, but that's the day where there's a group of people who all wear medals who may see when you have coffee or something like that, feel like they're running on the field with you. You know, like I had a few of those moments that I had to weave into those bits of the story, and that was probably the best one, I think, that I've done.
How does Anzac Day feel for you?
Same as every other day. I say that and I throw it away only because this comes from a great place of people. You know what I mean? Like it comes from a genuinely great place in people's hearts where they're like, God, it must be hard on Anzac Day. And you're like, what? I've got photos of guys we lost in my man cave at home. It's every day. Some days it's worse. Some days it's better. Anzac Day is just the day everyone else sees it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was part of it. That's obligation a little bit. I mean, but yeah, that's sort of it. Like I like it as a day where as a country everyone gets behind people, but as a country I've seen Afghanistan's been different. Everyone's always is pretty cool with it. You know what I mean? Regardless of it being the operation that it was. You know what I mean? Like ultimately it's a pretty fruitless fight. And we committed a long time, you know, it's the longest war that we've ever had, you know. It cost squillions of dollars, it cost lives, it cost families, it cost people the ability to sleep. Like that's the big one, you know. I mean, there's guys who've gone through, who've sacrificed not just little bits of themselves to do the job, but, you know, their mental health when it came to their family security and then what they were doing and then just their ability to control themselves. You know, what they were doing. So, you know, they've given up a lot in a war that, let's face it, it's like at the end of the day, what did you achieve? Oh, we disrupted probably 3 or 4% of the product from a company that distributes heroin, you know, like a country that distributes heroin. When you look at those numbers, it's not really great.
How do you, that's another thing. It's like, how do you separate, like, because if you're there, you're on the ground, right? You can't be thinking about the reason why we're here or that bigger picture, right? How do you, like, or is this only something that you've thought about later on? Like,
yeah,
okay.
This took like years and years and years of working out, and you know, and then the ultimates of like, why did I do it? And like now I'm always looking for like the next opportunity. What's the next thing to channel my I can never be occupied mind? Yeah. You know, like you were saying, you've got to have like a goal or a focus. You know, like, and the odd one with that is sometimes I've got to go. It's okay not to have one at the moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like just do something to sharpen the saw. Yeah. Just as long as you're doing it somewhere, like just justify what you're doing, especially if you're doing circle work. Like if you're just in a holding pattern, like get good at being in a holding pattern, but be ready when you've got your exit.
I want to ask you a couple final things before we wrap up. We just mentioned again that Hacksaw Ridge moment. Now, I want to know for you, like, back on set, how was it when you put the gear on for the first time? And then when you're there at the moment and you're filming it, I know the way that, you know, we were trained, one of the things you can do, you use an element of truth, right?
Yeah.
How was that for you as someone who had genuinely lived this yourself in real life? Did you use that? Was it too overwhelming to use that? What was that experience like? And did it bring back any like of the PTSD sort of thing? What was that like for you?
I mean, I know there was a bit of worry before it. So through the film, it was cool. When we knew I'd been cast, we got a call off the producers. I met with both of them, said hi to Mel. We did this little thing, and that was wild. Like I walked into a thing at Fox Studios. You walk upstairs. There's this 3 rows of faces on a wall. I'm like, there's Vince Vaughn. There's Sam Worthington. There's Andrew Garfield, fucking Spider-Man. Like, and you're going through these faces, and then like, I remembered Faraz was great in Underbelly, you know, and like he's on the 3rd tier, and there's me sitting right in the middle of it, my smiling head, and I'm like, wow. And then so we spoke about it, and I knew that was the time they were going to ask. Like, is it okay if we blow your legs off again?
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever we have to do, whatever we've got to do to make this work, let's do it. I just knew I had to warn the boys.
Yeah.
But they called and go, look, do you know anyone who would have knowledge about World War II stuff? And a guy called, I can't say his name, damn it, he's still in. But he's literally got a room at his house that's dedicated to war memorabilia. And I'm like, have you got it. So we said yes. I called him and just said, hey, mate, I've got a thing for you. You know your World War II stuff that he spoke about? And I said, yeah, because Mel Gibson's directing this thing and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, are you joking? Like, man, it's a pretty elaborate one. Like, I haven't called you in like 5 years, and I just randomly call you to make a joke about a movie.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, do you want to be the medical advisor or not? And he's like, yeah, I'll get back to you. I said, okay. So I'll take that as much of a yes as I can. But then, so he couldn't go to set the day. Like, he was like, I can't see this again. And I, like, for me, in the point of view that I had, I remember looking at the prosthetics, because there was a couple of days in fitting them and getting it worked out. I remember looking and going, I wonder whether that's what it's like, and feeling my body feel a little faint. Like, because I tried to find it. But yeah, when it came to doing it, I was like, they'd spoken, there was buzz about Andrew's thing. If he gets this right, he's going to get an Oscar nod. And I was like, if there's a scene that you've got to get right, this is one of them.
Pretty pivotal scene.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, this is so, before I did it, I got to put me aside enough to go, I've just got to be good enough for Andrew to believe it. Yeah. Like, he's absolutely got to believe this. So just, we had a queue, which was a thing blowing up next to us. It was blowing a bit of debris. And I remember being there, like, laying down and just like going, as soon as that bang goes off, you're going to open your eyes and you're going to just take what you see and just deal with it. And, like, obviously you don't feel the pain, but, like, I remember, like, bang, and, like, I was crunching my teeth together pretty much, like, grinding at it. And then he would do the bit that he does and stuff like that. That's before we did my dialogue bit. I remember Mel, he came out of the thing and he sort of came and squatted down next to us. He goes, so, you know, we were talking about it beforehand, and, you know, you gotta, like, look up. And at the moment, I'm, like, looking at Braveheart type thing. And he's like, and you look up, and I was like, he's doing the scene where Braveheart gets gutted. And, you know, I don't know whether they see God or what they see. Like, he's sort of doing this thing in his husky voice. And I'm just like, this is just rad. This is awesome. And he goes, just open your mouth a bit more when you're doing it. It's great. We're going to do it again. We'll do it again. And then he hustles back to the thing. And I remember the next time I was like, I'm leaving every bit of it out here. Yeah. Like, this is the one. And when bang, I've gone back into it. I was like, this time you've got years in you of this. You can just let it go. Just do it. And, like, it was, I could never cry in kids acting class. I didn't even get close. Like, nothing went close to making me cry, because every single imaginary circumstance I could find a solution. Like, there was a solution. There's someone I could call. I can get my way out of this type thing. You know, there was always something that made it unreal. But then when I was there, and I remember at the end of one of them, Andrew, like, rubbing my chest, and I'm like, I'm fine, mate, I'm fine. We're good. Let's do it again. I remember looking, and Mel was literally running out of the tent. And he's wearing flip-flops at the time, too, like thongs and jeans. And he's, like, just charging over, just like, and he, like, comes out, yeah, bang. And I just slapped him. This is mad. And then, like, my girlfriend at the time comes out, like, her face was alight. Like, she was just pumped. And it took a lot. Like, she was a bit of a hater when it came to, like, you know what I mean? Like, a little bit. She was so young that she didn't really understand that you can be cool with something else doing well. And that will probably help you do well later down the track, but whatever. And then when she go, I was like, okay, if she's going to give us this one, it must be. And she came, and they go, we're going to have a rest before the next one, and we're going to do it. I might do it one more time. And she comes out and she goes, I said, what was it? Did it look real? Like, was it good? She goes, yeah, I was watching it, and I remembered looking at it, and I sort of had to look away because, and she goes, but to do that, she looked at the rest of, like, Video City, which is just this group of people, you know, the producers and Mullan stars standing watching these TVs, and she goes, everyone was crying. And, like, as an actor, that's probably the nicest thing that anyone could ever say. You know what I mean? Like, that felt, I was like, okay. And then I was just untouchable the rest of the day. Yeah. I felt like it was great. It was exhausting, but, you know, and then, you know, especially him thinking, Because I remember a little bit of me was that you're acting. So when he was rubbing my chest, I knew that he was rubbing my chest, and I was absolutely ready to go again. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, okay, let's go again. Yeah, cool. But then it sort of sank in the next day when I went back, because you shoot that from so many different angles, and then you've got to do one where you're not making noise, where you're like just going, and he's, okay, Rob, I'm gonna get you home. Yeah. And then like I've got to do the I've got kids, like gotta go out of here thing, which I think I got to do from the first take and angle. But yeah, like it was please get me home. I remember like one of them I must have been really pleading with him. Like I proper got there. But like if you look at the extended cut that we got, like they were rad. They gave us a full theater at Fox Studios and said you can bring 70 people. That's cool. Who are close to you, and you can all watch an advanced screening of it. That's cool. And like they gave me the extended cut of that bit, and I think it looked pretty believable. Yeah. Mum's like
everything, all the reports I heard after it was nothing but good and compliments for you.
It was pretty cool. Yeah. Well, it's just cool. Like the next day you rock up, and everyone was excited to see me. Yeah. They're just like, man, we heard about yesterday. Yeah. Like, and then, it was just really cool. Like everyone on that, in the army, everyone's walking in the same direction, but on that set, everyone's just loving the fact they've got the job as well. Like everyone's stoked to be where they are. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like this is.
Yeah, that's when the magic happens, right?
Yeah. Like this is it.
The one thing I wanted to make sure I asked you as well before wrapping up was obviously you've gone through this whole fucking crazy journey in life, but how did becoming a dad change you after all that?
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the best, but it's the hardest thing. Easily the hardest thing. Yeah. Like it was something that we were sort of, I had reached out to my wife when we were, I think this is when I was detaching. I spoke about the two guys. Yeah. I would go up to my parents who live on the Central Coast, and, a lot of the girls I'd meet in Sydney or whatever would know me as that guy. You know what I mean? Like you'd sort of, because there aren't too many double amputees. And if you're a double amputee who's, doing something, you're either a Paralympian or, you're there somewhere. There just aren't that many of us. And I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about movies. I didn't want to talk about that. I just kind of wanted to, so what's a good coffee shop or what's happening? And I remember sending her a message I was up for Christmas, I think it was. I sent her a message the day before Christmas Eve, seeing if she wanted to catch up. And, we caught up on, like, Christmas Eve, and then we're only together for, like, 6 months. And then she fell pregnant with my daughter. And I remember having the moment where I was just like, okay, wow, everything just changed. All right. And then, like, I found it's like the positive reinforcement loop where, like, everything it taught me made me feel better as a person. If you know what that means, like, you sort of, I know what that means, sorry, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so tough, but just so cool. Like, that's the whole reason. I'd looked for so many. It's definitely not being in a Hollywood movie. It's definitely not finding your own thing. Like, it's just literally that. I've got 2 kids and they're just the best. Yeah. Like, watching him do something, like leaving today, my boy was on his belly with, like, one of the wife's good friend's kids, and they're both watching an iPad. And I've never seen anything that cool in my whole life. You know what I mean? You just constantly turn into that person who's taking photos of their dog. Of every little thing. But of everything. Like, every single little thing that they do. That's so cool. Like, my boy, this is the cool, like, just little things. They just make you almost cry with joy. Like, and I only have, like, this is a strange one. I got new prosthetic feet, and they give me so much more freedom that I found myself crying at the dinner table. But not when my family were there. I was just on the computer. And just because it'd been so different for so long, I found that it got me in that time, like, and I'd still cry during movies and stuff like that. Like, but this was just amazing, and these feet feel great. But then I'm driving home with the boy, and we're singing like the Toy Story, so he's singing the Toy Story soundtrack, And we're only on like the fifth, maybe sixth time that we've played the 3 songs at the start of the Toy Story soundtrack, and he's just loving it. I'm absolutely sick of it. But then I hear no noise from the back. I'm like, oh. I'm looking at Ari. And he's out. And I know, because we're a roundabout away from home. If he goes to sleep, he's asleep. Then I got to work. I got to get him out of the car. We've got to do something. The girls were at gymnastics. Oh, Jesus. Okay, here we go. So Ari, oi, hey. I kind of give him that. And he kind of wakes up and he's groggy. Yep. Just super groggy. And I was just like, oh, no, okay, stay with me. We're going to do this. And like hit the gate. So the gate's open at the door. Garage door's open. Drive down the driveway into the thing. I'm like, oh, stop the car. Ari. Oh, Ari. And then his head's slunched over. And I see him go and smile. He's got me. And I'm like, he's 3. And he did that. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Like,
that's so cool, man.
They just melt you all the time. I mean, and then, but then there's the new one. They unlocked a different door to me. You know, like, I've done enough cool stuff, but the next thing is, like, my kids have got to go to school, and I don't want them to go to school and say, Dad went to war 25 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, every now and then, you know, Dad goes and does a motivational talk for corporate group. You know, I want to then, the thing that scared me so much of going, everyone's got runs on the board already, is now literally like, okay, cool. I got to jump in the ring with those same guys. Like, let's get the game up to make sure that I'm ready to do that, so that when my kids go to school, they can, this is what Daddy does, type thing. And I think they're the only ones that could get me over that next thing of not being content and going, I've done enough. You know what I mean?
So what's next? We'll wrap up. What are your goals at the moment? What's next? Like, what can people expect to see from you? Obviously, like, as I said, one of the most sought after, like, speakers for all these events, but is there anything else on your mind that you feel like you might try next?
Like, it's got to be something that's really difficult. Like, there's a corporate placement that we're sort of looking at when it comes to supplying the Army with a specific bit of equipment. That's there's reasonably large barriers for entry, but I'm kind of working with someone who's already been in that game, I think he's sort of, I kind of like it, you know, he's confident in what I can bring to the table. So, and that's the thing. I don't want it to be a gift. If someone gives it to me, I don't want it to be a gift. If here you go, here's your free desk to do something. Like, it's got to challenge me or I couldn't be bothered. Later on this year, we got, like, last year I worked on a photographic exhibition for Richard Weiss, a really talented photographer. And we did 75 veterans and we launched at Victoria Barracks. And it's really cool. We got everyone through from the RSM of the Special Operations Command to the old Chief of Army, Ken Gillespie. I dragged everyone out of my call register that I possibly could, and we got, like, the most diverse, awesome range of people who've got, like, just the wildest experiences. There's, like, this and that project, you know, some days you leave and you're inspired. Like, you'll leave this podcast and you'll literally be ready to put a grey tracksuit on and run like Rocky. Every day out of there, like, practically every day, you just leave and just be like, wow, someone would tell you this story. And then they'd say something like, they go, oh, but it's nothing like what you've been through. And you're like, wow, I've, like, literally just been floored by how epic your battle back was. Like, it's just amazing. And then, so it was just a real privilege and treat to be able to do that. But that's, and, you know, and then be sort of a medium to show, you know, the country what these people are. And, you know, and I found that's one thing, you know, you recognize veterans in that way. That's something that can help them unpack some of the stuff they've been through, because it's a sense of purpose and meaning.
Because not everyone, you know, has the story that you do and gets to do, you know, their opening ceremonies, Anzac Day, and all these things.
Yeah, you're always getting asked, right? That's the thing, Invictus Games, the first Invictus Games, I always knew that I was going to it. Like, they literally asked me and then go, oh, you can just compete in whatever you want to. Like, what do you do? And like, it's sort of athletics. I'm like, oh, no, shot put. Oh, I don't know. Just fly me to London.
I'll do it.
You know, And so it didn't mean.
Did you meet any of the princes when you did that?
Yeah. I met William first when we were at Holsworthy.
Oh, he came out?
Yeah, he came out when the year I got injured. And I like pretended to grab his ass and you get the brief, don't touch him. Like, don't be too chummy with him and blah, blah, blah. Don't touch his hand unless he touches you. His name is Your Excellence and blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So we'd had the talk and stuff and we'll get in the photo. And when you stand with your weight on one leg, he did that, but then switched legs and placed his ass in my hand. And because it's one of those sports photos it's taken, you see his face change as he turns to me. I think someone's grabbing a touch of my ass there. I'm only human, Your Excellence. That's all I could think of. In between thinking, I'm going to get torched for this. And then we met Harry the first time I met Harry, me and Dad had gone out to dinner in an Italian, like an Indian restaurant. And I got the hot vindaloo. And we put this hot vindaloo out with Chardonnay. So both of us were glazy. Yeah. Like, we were both. And that was the first time we met him. And he could see it. He could literally see it in our face. Like, there's a photo of him just sort of laughing at us in the meat thing because you're just a belt-fed meeting and me introducing him to Dad. And then I saw them both together. But of all places, you're in the toilet. So I couldn't take a photo of all of us. But I said to William, I was like, oh, hey, mate, how you doing? Do you remember coming out to Australia like 5 years ago and there's a guy touch your ass about my height, nice smile, like kind of did that. And he sort of, oh, how's it going? And had a, little thing. So, I mean, and then Prince Harry was having beers with us after the closing ceremony. And like the question was, does he care? That's what you always think. He's the ambassador of it, but does he give a f*** that it's happening? The whole time, like he literally thought of the closing lineup, James Blunt played third or fourth. And the Foo Fighters closed. And he's like, do you think that James Blunt flattened the mood too much? Like, I think he might have flattened the mood too much. Like, you had the Foo Fighters closed. It's good.
Pretty good, yeah.
It's good enough. It's good enough, mate. You know what I mean? Like, just the fact that he's doing that. Yeah. Actually cool to do that. But again, the experience was something that I didn't feel like I had to work for. Yeah. You know what I mean? That it was something that more got given. I found I respect the ones that are harder.
You might think it was given and not earned, but I think what you've gone through, a lot of people would disagree. But again, that's just the commando mentality.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, part of that. I mean, and that's one of the things. But like I know the amount of catharsis that can come with like just telling the stories. Parts of them are obviously easy, parts of them are hard. But there's some people who just don't have that audience type thing. You know what I mean? And I think that would be the hard one. I remember sitting with Jude once. We were down at North Bondi RSL. Yeah. On the balcony there, and he would like look out at the lights, and we were at that space of like 8 beers, so we're well on our way. And he's like, "Man, do you think they know what we did?" I'm like, "Man, I don't think that they have to. Like the fact that everyone can just sleep under those lights, man, means that we got it done the right way. Like, let's just look at it that way. Like, no one has to worry about walking out that door and stepping on an explosive. You know what I mean? Where, I think we're all right.
Yeah. It's crazy, like, not many people have, are in that position to live that sort of life with that sort of perspective.
It's wild, eh?
Wild, yeah. For me, someone like me that's lived like, very, very normal life compared to you, like, it's just like.
And I was in Whistler before we deployed to Afghanistan, right? I flew over, one of my best mates was over there. He was doing a season snowboarding. And at that stage, I had a unit down here that I was renting, like a third floor walk up that you saw part of Botany Bay and the Novotel and whatever with, and thought I made it. I've got my own unit. I've got my own furniture. I can make rent, do whatever. This is great. So I sort of said to him, like, man, what are you doing? You're 27, 28 years old or whatever, and you're in Whistler waiting tables. What are you going to do? Because I always, like, respect all my mates, but, like, he was one of the really sharp ones. It's like, man, like, what are you doing with yourself? And he's like, the last thing I want to do is be 80 years old, sitting across from you in the nursing home and have to look you in the eye and say, mate, I sat on the sidelines. And I still think about that. Like that's, and then we'd sort of say it. It's all about having cool stories.
Yeah.
If
Well,
got cool
you've certainly got a lot of them, and we could easily talk for another 2-3 hours. But I don't know if the microphone's picked it up. I turned off my alarms. I'm like, we'll definitely be done by then. That's a sign that the podcast has gone long. But Damien, as I said, like an honor to get to speak to you for this extended time, and for people to hear your story. Obviously, your book's still available. A soldier's without warning, a soldier's extraordinary journey, that's available online for anyone that just connected to your story, wants to follow along your journey or learn more. Is there a best place for that? Your website, Instagram? What's kind of the best place if someone wanted to?
I don't really mind. I mean, I do a bit of Instagram. I do a little bit of that. I mean, that sort of thing. I don't have to hustle in that way. And I think I'm almost not. Like most of my Instagram, you'll probably see photos of my kids. New dog, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, it's not a huge platform, but if you feel a need or if you're going through something, I don't mind it. Every now and then, it's still every couple of months, there'll be an amputee or someone who reaches out. Yeah. I've obviously got a little bit of experience dealing with those type of things. Just know it won't cost you anything. So just write something, and I'll do my best to write back and make sure that we can try and work out a good solution for it. I think that's sort of it. I mean, beyond that, like enjoy your own journey. I think that's the main thing. Enjoy the fact it's hard. It's supposed to be. You know what I mean? That's when you're getting the benefit. A big reset in my brain was, rather than going, it's hard now, I've got to stop. It's hard now, this is when I'm getting results. You start thinking like that, all of a sudden, the hard becomes the fun bit, the bit where you're growing. So just enjoy your journey, I guess, is the thing. Yeah, well said. And Damien, like, thank you again for coming in, giving us your time. I know you don't like to think of what you did in your service as sacrifice, but again, to everyone else, thank you for your sacrifice and all that you do and continue to do, and inspiring people and advocating for change and a better way forward. So thank you very much, brother. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Cheers. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode or you got something out of it, do yourself a favor, do me a favor, do your friends a favor and share this with them, and they can come along on this journey with us. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.